they call it the rapture. Paul talks about it. Then there's this other thing where Christ literally will put his feet on the earth. It'll be on the Mount of Olives. It's given to us in the book of Zechariah. And when he does, it will split open and the river will run backwards. Then he'll come in, collect the saints, and then goes flying up north. And if you know your geography, the valley of Jezreel is also known as the valley of Megiddo, and that's where we get the battle of Armageddon. And that's when Christ literally will come back and put his feet on the ground. You've got some people that go, oh, those two things are going to happen at the same time. It doesn't say that. So I can't, you can't put that in there. And as much as there's other people that there's this thing called tribulation, which means the trying of your faith. And in the book of Daniel, it says it happens in a 7-year period. And man, it is going to be a horrible time on earth. Especially, it's divided up into half, the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years. And there is the second 3.5 years, there is a battle that is described that is so bloody that the blood will run like a river, and it will be to the depth of a horse's bridle and flow for a quarter of a mile. Let's go!
Welcome back to the show. The last episode we did was really, really good. I know I had a good time. We had a lot of positive feedback, both in our Discord and from people I know who watched, and then the comments on YouTube and Rumble for the most part. There's always some naysayers who want to get into the weeds of semantics and stuff like that because we're talking about religion. But you're coming on tonight. We're going to touch on some subjects that we hit on the last time, but overall, eschatology, something I have just learned was a field of study, a couple weeks ago because of Chris. But we talked about some of the things like the red heifer, the temple, all of this last time, which I know we're going to get into. But I don't want to necessarily have a conversation where it's like eschatology 101. What is it? But I feel like we should define what that is up front for those of us who are listening who don't know what it is. So would you mind doing that, Pastor Eric, what eschatology is?
Sure.
Hey, before you get into it, Dad, I got to say one thing. Did you know I was reliably informed by the comment section that you are a bought and paid for shill for Israel?
Well, then, let's let the cat out of the bag. I am a 4th generation Jew, so,
Damn. Are you being paid by PragerU?
No. I'm pretty much a peon that has just been climbing through the scriptures myself and looking to see what is out there, and not being influenced by others, but trying to make my own decisions. What I see, where I do come from is I try to be faithful, honest, with the scriptures. And bring them in. It is my belief that it is our roadmap to life, to eternal life, and to life and a better life here on this planet, as God wants to give us a better life. The biggest thing that we can do then is understand the roadmap and know how to read it so that we have a great journey on the road. Avoid the pitfalls that will lead us into types of destruction, despair, different things alongside the road that will knock us off of having that enjoyable life. And I think that's huge. So you got to know the roadmap. Eschatology, let's get back over to that really quick, is the study of things into the future, prophecies fulfilled, if you will, or yet to be fulfilled. And so basically that's what eschatology is about. You said you just learned the term. Quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I love getting rid of 3-syllable, 4-syllable words. And getting down to, let's just understand it. We don't need a great big huge vocabulary to try to make ourselves sound educated. That's totally irrelevant. Do you understand? Do you comprehend? Can you do it with a 6th to 8th grade background education? That's good enough. that's good enough, because after then, go ahead.
I was just going to say, not just that, but if you can't teach what you know to a child, then how well do you really know
Correct.
it? Do you really know it, or are you just regurgitating, what your social humanities professor tells you?
Don't know. That's what I was told. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where I want to be. I mean, we can throw out the term eschatology, because if you were to go look it up, get a subject matter, go on Google, that's going to be a word that you're going to want to know and use. But rather, if you end up just wanting to talk about those things that the Bible talks about that are going to happen into the future, you don't need to know the word eschatology. Prophecy might be a good word to have, something that has been foretold. But even prophecy and being foretold comes down into two particular categories. There are the things that are foretold that are in the future, and then the reason why most of the prophets in the Bible were called prophets was because they were going to foretell God's judgment, and that was going to happen in the here and now. A common phrase that is used with the prophets is, "Thus saith the Lord." This is going to happen. That's a prophet. A lot of those guys pretty rough with some of the judgments and so forth that they brought down on top of Israel. Israel deserved them. Israel here, God did everything for them that he possibly could, and they still said, nanny, nanny, boo-boo, we don't want what you got, and walked away from him. And he said, well, if that's what you're going to do, then I'm going to let you go. And he did. And there's thousands of years that there's all kinds of things that are stuck on top of that. And the same thing goes with what the Jews did with Christ. So they did it the first time with God's love and the way it was. And you have Isaiah, you have Jeremiah, you have Obadiah, you have Amos, you have all these different prophets that come down and say, "Thus saith the Lord, turn back to God or destruction falls upon you." And then, Daniel then prophesies, "Yes, I'm in Babylon because you guys over here couldn't follow God. But God's telling me something is going to happen into the future." Then he prophesies something that happens way out into the future. And so did Isaiah. And so we have those kinds of things that are going on. And so it's good to go through the books. It's good to figure out what has happened, what hasn't happened. We just happen to be in a day. Let me try to explain this. One of the reasons why I just tripped upon this, by the way. Heavens opened up, the angels sang, and revelation hit me. From the time of Christ until 1948, there was no Israel in Israel. Okay? 2,000 years the Jews had been removed from the land that was promised to them by the Bible. From the 1700s to the early 1900s, the volumes of books that had been written that God's prophecy wasn't going to happen because people couldn't wait for 2,000 years for God's things to come into vogue, come into sight. When it did in 1948, through 48 all the way up until I was a kid, even longer, I was a teenager, almost in Bible college myself. I heard the same thing that was propagated in the 1800s and early 1900s when Israel had not come back to the land. They totally redid and re-understood prophecy, because the very thing that made futuristic prophecy come to life was when Israel in 1948 came back to the land and became a nation. Now, all of a sudden, all these other things that a lot of people had taken a look at in eschatology and said, well, it's a metaphor. God didn't really mean it was Israel, because Israel isn't in Israel. God didn't really mean, in fact, all the way up to 1948, that area that they lived in was called Palestine. It wasn't until 48 that they started changing the name back to Israel, because the people of Israel called it Israel. Other than that, historically, when England took over, what was that, in the teens? prior to World War I believe. With the British,
World War I, they had the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War I.
It was after World War I.
Okay,
in the British Empire, and they're the ones that renamed it, and in the world map, and it was called Palestine. And so that's everybody's understanding. So there was no Israel there. So you compare all those prophecies that talk about Israel being in the land, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. 2,000 years they hadn't been in the land. What makes people think they were going to be in the land now? And so those volumes of books and all those ideas of the prophecy carried over into the 50s. Even though Israel was there, it's 48, how close to the 50s, 60s, 70s. As a young man, I'm hearing things now that I am having to get out of my thinking and start thinking about prophecy, eschatology in a whole nother way, in a more literal way. Things are being fulfilled, and that's some of the stuff we want to get into tonight. It's literal. It's not just metaphorical.
Right. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about prophecy, and obviously when you're discussing religion in the Bible, that you're also discussing people's interpretation of what prophecy means. You were referencing it too when what you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
In eschatology, are there major camps on the interpretation of prophecy, or is this more so on the individual eschatologist, and there's not a lot of academic division within the field of eschatology?
How long do you want to take on this answer?
You can, I'm just curious.
Let me give you the brief.
Mm-hmm.
There is as many ideas as you can shake a stick at. There's almost one for every person that doesn't, because there still is mystery. There isn't things that we know. There isn't things that we can see. There are still people who are propagating the idea that Israel coming back into the land, well, God really wasn't talking about Israel. What he was really talking about, the Christians, a substitution thing. The Christians take Israel's place, and God's talking about the modern day Christians during that time. That seems to be debunked, but there are still people that will tell you that and will go off of that. There are this one thing when we talk about the return of Christ coming back to earth, there's seems to be these two different descriptions. One description is when he will be in the air. He literally will not come down to earth, and he will call Christians up to him. They call it the rapture. Paul talks about it. Then there's this other thing where Christ literally will put his feet on the earth. It'll be on the Mount of Olives. It's given to us in the book of Zechariah. And when he does, it will split open and the river will run backwards. And there's just so many different things that's going to end up happening when he does that. And then he'll come in, collect the saints, and then goes flying up north. And if you know your geography, the valley of Jezreel is also known as the Valley of Megiddo, and that's where we get the Battle of Armageddon, and that's when Christ literally will come back and put his feet on the ground. You've got some people that go, oh, those two things are going to happen at the same time. As much as I would maybe love that, it doesn't say that. So I can't, you can't put that in there. And as much as there's other people that there's this thing called tribulation, which means the trying of your faith. And in the book of Daniel, it says it happens in a 7-year period. And man, it is going to be a horrible, horrible time on earth. Especially it's divided up into half, the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years. And there is the second 3.5 years, there is a battle that is described that is so bloody that the blood will run like a river, and it will be to the depth of a horse's bridle and flow for a quarter of a mile. Do you know even for what Chris does, it's hard to imagine a river of blood that deep and how many bodies it takes to make that happen. That is a lot of biology. That is a lot of biology right there.
Yeah, I've been to and I've seen the Euphrates, which is about as deep as you're describing, and the section that I saw was at least a couple hundred, maybe 150 meters wide, and the rate that it flows is highly deceptive too, because of how wide it is. You can't really tell, but the idea of like being there and having seen it, and then like what you're describing, that is, you can't even really contemplate the amount of carnage that would be. And then with that much biological material suddenly open, like the post disaster on that would be something like we haven't seen in the world probably since World War II, at least, to even come close.
Correct.
So it's pretty insane. I do want to say here right at the top though, because we're gonna get. Can I say this real quick? Hold on.
Yeah. We have not pasted together. This is a disclaimer for those listening. We have not pasted together a timeline. I have jumped all over the place.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you to go back. Yeah, for sure. But I wanted to say like right up top here, because I can feel people just like getting prickly, because there's like, this is a very hot topic issue. Since we talked, you've already mentioned Israel and you mentioned Palestine, and we're talking about the Jewish people, and there's a lot of heat on the internet about this right now. We are talking about this tonight from a biblical perspective, from a Christian biblical perspective. This is not meant to be a political discussion, so everybody just holster your keyboards. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We are looking at the Bible, pure and simple. There is a difference between Israel and Israelis, and then ethnic Jewish people and religious Jewish people, because it is an ethno-religious people. So there are lots of Jews that are atheists and don't believe in God at all. There are lots of Jews that are still practicing Orthodox Jews. There's even Jews that practice Christianity because they recognize
Messianic Jews,
the person of Jesus Christ. And there's, so yes, we understand all of that, right? Holster all of that. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the politics of Israel. We are just talking about this from a Christian biblical perspective, largely coming from the books of Daniel, some from the Gospels, and mostly Revelation.
Right. There is one thing, though, in our approach that we need to understand, because I think maybe it'll give us a better picture of what we're talking about. So let's go back to David, King David, who was a real king. He existed. If anybody needs to know, look up the Davidic stele. There's a great story to that. Stele is a rock that has been written on, and it was used on a gate building. They tore the gate down and then used it for a cobblestone. And so they're up in, I believe it was Lachish, which is up in the north, and there was a dig going on there, and this gal's uncovering a rock, taking her little brush, because they do it ever so gentle as they're, and as she hits a stone and it came loose. She didn't mean to do it, and she picks it up and she turns it over, and she puts it right back down. She goes and gets the guy the archaeologist who's the head of the dig, because it became the first time in history. People always wondered, did David even exist, because of all the superhuman things that they are attributed to him. And on the back of that one stone that she picked up was the inscription, "By order of the house of David." And it was the first time in history that there was something outside of the Bible that actually gave reference to the David. King David. Yeah, King David. So that and so that's been within the past 20 years. That this has come along. Anyway, so you take David, and he brings the kingdom together. Solomon, probably the greatest kingdom that ever existed on earth, was underneath Solomon. The wealth, the riches, the expansion, and that even goes for the United States when you take a per capita look at what Solomon did to the entire nation. His treaties, everything that he had, his wealth was just incredible for the size of the country. And then but because of what he had done, the next thing And if you look, if everybody can in their mind's eye imagine what the state of Vermont looks like and tip it sideways a little bit, that kind of is the structure of Israel. And when Solomon comes along, when his sons are going for it, it's not too good. Bad stuff is happening. Kingdom is ripped in half, and then it's known as the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. Southern Kingdom is called Judah. Northern Kingdom is called Israel. And from that time forward, everything that happens in the Northern Kingdom, all the kings are considered to be evil. So I bring that up because as we see those administrations, none of them go according to God. All of them are outside of what he wanted, what he respected. They didn't even have priests that were in their towns that even offered God. In fact, it was so bad that there were several priests that were equal opportunity priests. They not only served Jehovah, but they also served Baal. They also served Dagon, and they had Asherah poles, and they would, put your children through the fire. Or, hey, if you brought them a blood sacrifice of a donkey, they would put that in there too, and they would do those kinds of things. So that was
kind of like when the doctor comes walking in, he's like, all right, who we seeing today? But it's the priest, and he's like, all right, who we sacrificing today?
Yeah.
What do we got, boys?
It was exactly it. They were equal opportunity priests. And that's what was going on in the northern land. That is very much, those people in the land during that time are very much like the people in the land today. The government, the kings, the religious part, they were all over the place. But God still treated them as a people. No matter what their government did, no matter what the people were doing, they were still God's chosen people and put under his ethnic rule. He did. He saw to them because they were all descendants of Abraham, and his promise is to Abraham and his descendants. So it doesn't, so we all need to see that in that. What Chris said is right. There's a difference between all of that. But just like God saw all of those political things back then, is the same way that he still sees Israel today because of the promise he made to Abraham and his descendants. And that's where the promise goes.
There's actually a story in the Old Testament, just to back you up, where he has one of the prophets that he orders to go out and marry a prostitute.
Oh, yeah.
In front of the people.
One of the most beautiful stories in the Bible, I think.
Starts with an H. What's the prophet's
Hosea.
name? Hosea, thank you. Hosea and Gomer. Right?
Yep.
So he has Hosea. I remember the Gomer. Has him marry a prostitute.
Well, golly. Anyway.
And only in order to be a physical representation of God to the people of Israel. And in fact, at one point, Gomer leaves Hosea, and he has to go and repurchase her, like down in the town
in
square,
front of everybody,
in front of the Israelite nation, in order to. And my wife and I were having a conversation about this earlier today, getting ready for this topic tonight, in order to display God's chesed love, like his undying love. And the idea of that word chesed is that God remains faithful to the promise that he made Abraham, even when the Israelite nation is acting like a prostitute over and over and over and running away from
And
him.
it says in Hosea, even though you whore yourself.
Right.
That's and so the people of Israel still seen the same way. So that's no different than the way that God looks at them. He still requires his righteousness. He still requires to chase after him, love him, which changes your life when you do that. Doesn't matter the government or whatever, and are responsible, just like all the rest of the kings. It says this king did evil in God's eyes. This king did evil in God's eyes. He still had a requirement for him, whether they liked it or not.
Well, let me ask you this. One of the things we talked about last time was working toward where we're fulfilling these prophecies. You'd mentioned the third temple and how we were headed towards that. There were all these times we talked about the red heifer and all these things, right? Is there a way to have a conversation about what sort of prophecies or biblical wickets, right, need to be checked to reach the point where now, we are fulfilling prophecy, and you can say, without a doubt, marching toward what is predicted in the Bible for the end times, right? Like, so what boxes have been checked and what boxes are needing to be checked, and how are we making our way towards that using evidence?
Okay. Chris, could you do Matthew chapter 24 for me? Jesus gives us a very specific thing that a lot of people don't hinge the end times on. And but they hinge it on a lot of other things, such as the temple. And I'll explain a little bit of reason why, because that goes to Daniel. And Daniel tells us that there will be a temple, and when the last 7 weeks are going to come, there's a ticking clock. You can measure the last 7 weeks, which, by the way, it represents years. And it's the last week, so it's 7 years. And we're given that interpretation in Daniel. That there will, by the description, there will be a temple. Well, let me take that back. Specifically, it doesn't say a third temple. It says that there will be sacrifice given. We assume there will be a temple because that's where sacrifices will be given. I'll throw a little cog in that wheel here in just a minute. We know that sacrifices will be given. We know that they will make atonement right now. And this is why this scripture makes sense. Right now, the Jews are not allowed by their own rules to do any worshiping on the Temple Mount. It says that there will be a leader who will make a covenant with them about offering sacrifices. So there's going to be a leader who's going to be over that, will allow them on the Temple Mount in order to do that. And it's really funny because back in the day, nobody really understood, he's going to make a covenant with them. Oh, well, since 1948, one of the very first things that they did when they came in, took over it, they would not take control of the Temple Mount. And IDF has always been in charge of keeping Jews off of the Temple Mount for the Muslims, because the Al-Aqsa mosque is up there, and so to keep the tensions down, IDF has kept people away, except for the past 2 years. At Day of Atonement 2 years ago, they half-heartedly kept people off of the Mount, and at Passover this past year, they pretty much protected people to come up on the Temple Mount and to pray. Mm-hmm. So we're watching that bar go down. So to keep peace, and you can see how that will cause anger between the Muslims and the Jews. So to keep peace, there's going to end up being a leader who's going to come in and make a covenant and say, boom, you guys can have the Temple Mount, and make a covenant with them. But in the book of Daniel, it tells us that will only happen for 3.5 years, and he himself will end up breaking the covenant, and he will desecrate the offering or the altar. Now, that's a pretty hard understanding of what he will do to desecrate it. So there's two major thoughts that will end up happening to say that he will desecrate it. Number one, Jews do not sacrifice pigs. So the possibility of a sacrifice of a pig on the altar instead of the appropriate sacrifice, or one that would even go even further and be even more of a desecration, would be the sacrifice of a human.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just a guess. Go ahead.
So in this logic train, the desecration would be committed by the leader of the Jewish people, and that desecration would be carried out by him?
Not the Jewish people, whoever the leader was that had the authority to say, okay, I will allow you to do sacrifices on the temple.
Not necessarily a Jew.
It's not necessarily a Jew. Something that is rather interesting. So let me put in all the things that we know that are there to fulfill this scripture, because this particular scripture is the one that really has the ticking of the clock. When we know that covenant is made, that is the beginning of 7 years. We know it. You can set a clock to it, which, by the way, the Bible, a lot of people goes, well, Jesus can come back at any time and we won't. That is true to a degree, but it specifically says no man knows the hour. Doesn't mean that we can't know the year. That's the thing. And most likely not even know the day. But I think we can end up knowing the year for those of us that can discern times and have our brains on it. So anyway, here's one of the things that has to happen in order for that sacrifice to be made. First off, there's a thing called a temple institute. And if we're going to make sacrifices, we believe we need to rebuild the temple. And so we need all of the things to go inside of the temple. And the priests need to have their garments, and there needs to be vestiges that they are supposed to have. The most important day of sacrifice for the Jewish people is the Day of Atonement, which is the one in October. That is a couple of years ago was October 6th, and we all know about the massacre that happened. Interestingly enough, that day was supposed to be a holy day sacred to God, where a sacrifice is made on behalf of the sins of the entire nation. And if you really want to think about it, all those people that were slaughtered and so forth, and I don't mean to be cruel, but let me ask you this question. What were they doing on the Day of Atonement when the slaughtering happened?
They were at a concert.
Yeah, they were at a music festival of some kind, yeah.
We're partying.
Yeah.
No humility, no seeking God on that day. And this is supposed to be the day that covers for their sin.
And this is why I've been pointing out for a long time that the modern state of Israel, and I'm only speaking about the government, is a secular government. It is not a religious Jewish government, because a lot of people get that twisted when they think, because there's a lot of semantic words that are thrown back and forth, Semitism, anti-Semitism, Jewish, Israeli, and a lot of these things get conflated in people's minds. But the government of Israel, as it's instituted right now, even though it makes provisions for the Jewish people to practice religion inside of the state, it itself is not a religious state. It is a secular state. It's a secular
government. Doesn't matter.
And in fact,
doesn't matter.
Well, I'm just making the distinction, but in fact, it's illegal for Christians in Israel to evangelize on behalf of Christianity.
A lot of evangelizing going on though right now. Tons of it
under the waves, but yeah. Anyway, please continue.
So we that's the Day of Atonement, and so to have that, this is where the red heifers come in. So we have all the vestiges, we have the altar. They have already dedicated the altar, have had 2 sacrifices on the altar. It is a mobile altar. It's been rather interesting to watch it. If anybody wants to go out on YouTube, I do believe the videos are still up from the first one and the second one. And if anybody is a worshiper of Christ, being the true Lamb of God, one of the things that we all do when we come into worship is the amount of reverence, the amount of holiness, righteousness that we give to it. We see ourselves in the reflection of that, which should cause us to pause. Do we enter into here because our righteousness is like filthy rags compared to God, and so forth. And so it brings a humility to man and mankind when you think of entering into that sacred place of worship between man and God. If you were to watch theirs, I mean, they don't even know what's going on. I've seen them pull out the silver trumpets, and by golly, they need somebody to really help them, teach them how to play those silver trumpets. They're a non-valve instrument. They're straight 14, 17-inch pipe trumpets made out of pure silver. So you have to play it with all lip action. I mean, it was awful. No tune, no tone. And yet I know some good American boys that get on those things and make some awesome sounds. But you watched, there was about 200, 300 people that was at this animal sacrifice, and not a one of them saw the lamb as laying down his life for them. Nobody had a reverence. There was partying going on. Kids were playing. It was almost like a picnic in the park. Not almost. It was like a picnic in the park.
How is this heifer being sacrificed? What is the mode to carry this out? Is this like a throat being slit? Like, what is?
Yes, throat being slit on the altar. None of the red heifer is to be offered to the priests. All the other offerings, except for a sin offering, there's basically 5 offerings that are given in the Old Testament. But all the offerings, except for a sin offering, the other 4, a portion of the beast goes to the priest. That's how they were fed, how they were taken care of. But a sin offering, all of it was to be given to God. Because it's for your sins. You're paying a price.
Right.
The red heifer is very much the same way because it is used for cleansing, and so the animal's throat is slit on an incredibly hot altar, and it is burned to insinuation. It is all the way to ash, because it is the ashes that are used for all the purification. The ashes is put with pure water. Water from a pure spring, and then that water is used to be sprinkled over top of everything that is to be dedicated and set aside to be holy, which is the priests,
including the priests,
their garments, all that other kinds of stuff. So and so everything is purified through the ashes of this red heifer, which, by the way, the ashes can be contained and held on to, because purification is supposed to happen every time that you need to pull it out. So they need to make the solution every time. And the Temple Institute has all of this. That's the amazing thing about the Temple Institute. In fact, you guys, have you seen the West Wall and the plaza that's at the base of the West Wall?
Yes,
I have.
Okay, the Temple Institute. So if you're facing the West Wall, if you immediately turn 90 degrees this way, there's a set of buildings. That's where the entrance to the Temple Institute is. If you go downstairs, they have a rabbinical school that is built underneath of that plaza. People walk above. They are directly underneath of it because they want the rabbinical school to be right next to the West Wall for the people to teach. They believe that it's that precious. That's where they want to be. And so the school is actually right down there, and that's where they do the teaching and so forth of that. So they have the red heifer. They have everything from the Temple Institute that goes inside of the temple that does all of that. And 2 months ago, it's almost 3 months ago now, the Sanhedrin, a group of 72 rabbis that are leaders of the country, anointed a man by the name of Baruch Kahani, and they have a high priest. So you can't do this. You can't have a Day of Atonement without a high priest, because it is the high priest himself that has to go into the Holy of Holies in order to make sacrifice for the people. And actually, it's not a sacrifice that he makes. The sacrifice is on the outside, takes the blood of a bullock, walks into the Holy of Holies. Well, before he walks in, he ties a rope around himself into the Holy of Holies, because if he is not found to be worthy, God will strike him dead. You pull him out, and you start going down the line and find another priest until there's one who is worthy to stand before God.
Because I'm not walking in there and getting that dude.
Nobody should, and you don't take that.
Yeah.
Don't take advantage of it. You play it by. I mean, if God strikes him dead, you better play it by the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
No kidding.
So, and then when he walks in, there's the Ark of the Covenant. Now, that's going to be impossible to replace, and we don't have. But that doesn't stop them. So you go in.
Might be in a church in Ethiopia.
I've heard about that. I've heard about that.
I'm interested where there's a lot of theories about where the Ark of the Covenant is. Even some people say Donald Trump has the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yes. You've not seen these photos of people standing next to an Ark at Mar-a-Lago?
Oh, my goodness. He has the Ark, but he doesn't have the list? Come on, man.
There's our political plug
Nailed
for the
it.
show right there.
All right. So, anyway, but the priest goes in with the blood of the bullock in a cup, and he takes the blood and he sprinkles it with his fingers. He flicks it across that top of the ark, because that is called the mercy seat. It is the place where the two cherubim and their wings come together. And what was there was what they call the Shekinah. That's the Hebrew word. The Shekinah glory of God sat over top of that mercy seat. And only one time a year he could go in, and he prays for himself. He prays for the people. And then when God finds him to be clean and pure, he comes out of there, and there is a goat. Specifically a goat. He lays his hands on the goat, and he proclaims that, and this is what I was getting about, those people, no people were partying, they weren't paying attention. God has this day every year. This is what you are to do. And he lays his hands on the goat, and he prays and places all the sins of the people on that goat. Ever heard of the term scapegoat? This is what it is. It comes from the Hebrews. And so they take that goat and they lead him out of the city, up over the hill, never to be seen anymore, which is a beautiful, beautiful display of what Christ does for our sins. He took them upon himself, and he took them away, and they're gone. They're gone forever. So you have that beautiful picture. It was physically done, and that's what was supposed to happen. And now we have a high priest who can do it. That's just been within the past 2 to 3 months. Baruch Kahani. He's been given that. He has all the vestiges. They've already been made, and I've gotten to see it. And if anybody wants to go on YouTube, look up the Temple Institute, the ephod that he is supposed to wear that has the 12 stones across the chest that represent each one of the 12 tribes of Israel. It's made. It's made to be put on. It's ready to go. There is a crown that the high priest is supposed to wear during this time because of what it says in the frontal of the crown. It says, "Holiness to the Lord." You don't come into the Holy of Holies without that crown. That's what you have to enter in with. So you have all of that. And I heard somebody, here's my kicker for tonight. I heard somebody say that if they're given access to the Temple Mount, they believe they know where the Holy of Holies was supposed to be. It's not where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is. It is off to if you're facing west on the backside of the mosque to the left, to the south, there's a square there that the stones aren't in there correctly. They believe that that's where the Holy of Holies used to be. If that is so, they don't have to build a temple. Do you know what the original worship place was made out of?
The tabernacle.
It's called the tabernacle, and it was made out of cloth. It was a tent. They could do the same thing and place the Holy of Holies over top of the spot that they believe where it was. And they have a priest, and they have everything else to go along with it. They have the altar. They can do sacrifices.
Yeah, one report that I read just yesterday, because you already talked about how they did two, we'll call them dress rehearsal sacrifices,
if you will,
because there was five red heifers that were raised in Texas and then transported over to Israel to be used by the Temple Institute, like you were talking about.
Yeah, this is the second time. This is the second time. Originally, there were 3, and now this is the second time there's 5 now. And so they have a total of 8.
So, well, minus 2, because they burnt.
The one went imperfect. So they did
That's what I was just
okay.
Talk about.
Go ahead.
And in how, like, scrutinized these animals are, the report that I read said that they found 2 black hairs as they were combing this animal over, and just 2 black hairs was enough to say this one's blemished, it's not pure enough, so they used it in another preparatory sacrifice to practice the whole thing. Then the report went on to say that as early as August, they can be ready to perform the actual sacrifice of the red heifer, which would then allow them to start doing the cleansing sections, right, parts of the service, to then cleanse the priests and all their tools, and then be ready to actually make sacrifice on the hill. So, like, they are actively making moves in this direction. In fact, one of the pools over there, one of the sacred pools, they're actually widening it out. I believe it's the well. Help me with this one.
It's the pool of Shalom. It's the pool of Siloam,
yeah.
But the thing of it is we know it's the Hebrew word for it is called mikvah. It is a mikvah that should handle a couple of thousand people at a time. So it's going to be a little bit bigger than the size of an Olympic swimming pool. But they have kept it hidden for a long period of time, and they have kept it half covered, if you will. In other words, they wouldn't excavate the whole thing. They'd only do half of it, and they do a little bit more, and then they do a little bit more. It has really taken them almost 8 years to uncover the pool of Siloam.
But they're actively preparing it for this.
So that means they're
ritual.
they're going to use it for a mikvah again, and there's going to be thousands of people, so they need a place for it to come. Pure water also is a big deal. They get pure water. There's one of 12 in the world cold water geysers. There's one in Israel. The point of a cold water geyser is that to do any sacrifices, the water you have to get to be pure water has to be pure moving water. And the Gihon, it runs underneath the Temple Mount, is a cold water spring, and it had geysers. There's a lot of history to the Gihon Springs, and it's there. But one of the things that it does is it runs back to the pool of Siloam and can fill it, and it would be mikvah waters because they're moving waters from a spring.
So historically, the pool of Siloam has been used for mikvahs before.
Correct.
Okay.
You want to hear prophecy that's not very famous and is just happening? So in the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel got this vision of the Dead Sea coming back to life. and is no longer the dead.
I saw this.
It is no longer the Dead Sea. Yeah, I sent it to you. Did you like that?
Yep.
And
I looked at it.
And it's just like, it is so wild. And so Jerusalem is in a mountain. And so the Gihon Springs, the Gihon Springs are come up from underneath this mountain. Well, in the 1100s, there was a series of earthquakes that we know of in Jerusalem, and the some of the tunnels and so forth for the Gihon Springs was cracked, and the geyser no longer splashes up. But the water's got to go somewhere, right? So, just saw a thing the other day. Gal was kind of showing it off. She goes to the southern end of the Dead Sea, and there are spring waters that are flowing out from underneath the mountains to the west that would lead to Jordan. But they're coming out from underneath the mountains, and the spring water is flowing into the south end of the Dead Sea. In those spring waters. By the way, 3,500 years ago, Ezekiel, 3,000 years ago, Ezekiel says, no, the Dead Sea is going to come back to life. There's going to, specifically, it says that there'll be fish in them. So this gal gets down in there and she starts showing you the algae from where the fresh water is banking into the south end. She gets in the water, she films it. There are fish in the Dead Sea.
Wow. Now, that's first off, that's freaking amazing. And that you've mentioned this. I want to know what other prophecies have been fulfilled that are proving, the Bible to be accurate. Other things that are marching us, if you could say, marching us chronologically down the road toward Revelation and the second coming of Christ.
Well, I see more accuracy in accurate biblical archaeology, because some of these things, have to be fulfilled. But number one, Israel coming back to the land. 2,000 years of that not happening, Israel coming back to the land, because all these things are written with Israel being in Israel. Something that has been incredible, if you go to between 200, 300 AD, Domitian, Caesar of Rome, between him and a couple of others, they tried to wipe the Jews totally off the map and rename the area. The whole reason why it got the name Palestine is from the hills around Rome, Palatinia. And so they renamed that area Palatine. Jerusalem was totally taken out, and it was Capitalia. That's what it was renamed. And so the Romans totally renamed it. What is interesting is that if you go to the cities over in Jordan, Egypt, other places, Turkey, that have ancient cities, I can't think of it. Constantinople isn't called Constantinople anymore, right? Okay, and so all the other areas around the Greek Isles, Mediterranean, other ancient areas have all changed their name, but the land that was God promised to his people, you go and you start looking at all the cities and they know where they are, and it is amazing how they all have the same 4,000-year-old names. Mm-hmm. Jericho is still Jericho.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, because you said that the name Palestine comes from the Roman for the Palatine Hill. I thought it was originated from the word Philistine.
No. No. The Romans renamed it that. The Philistines. That's where the name Palestine and Palestinians come from. The Philistines are a group of people that actually are from the southern points of Europe. Their DNA can be traced back to European lines. They were fishing people, and they basically crossed the Mediterranean Sea and came over and settled on the lands, and that's one of the reasons why There are Palestinians that want to trace their heritage back to Philistines, but there they are in the Gaza Strip. But for a lot of... Go ahead.
I was just saying, I'd always thought that, or I'd learned that Hadrian, essentially as like an insult to Jewish identity, had changed the name to Palestina as a way to invoke the Philistines as an insult to the Jews, and that's where the name Palestine came from.
Well, might have my history off, but I do know both of us realize that the origin of it still comes from Roman.
It does
from Roman
absolutely.
renaming it, and it was exactly for that reason, to insult the Jew and to wipe out their history. Which
isn't even the first time it happened to them.
No, the Babylonian,
well.
the Babylonian thing and being taken out was to wipe them out and so forth. So, those are those things happen because of exactly what Chris was talking about, politically walking away from God, becoming secular, even atheistic. Those were the measurements of punishment that came out on them. And if the Jews do not return to God, there will be the same thing, because the last time I knew, my Bible told me God doesn't change. In fact, when Christ returns, in the setup of his return, there will only be 144,000 that he will say, I'm taking you guys, the rest of you, toodles. That's millions. If he only takes 144,000, that's millions who are gone. But there are only 144,000. He puts a seal on them and he says, you're mine. I'm starting over with you.
Wow.
So
that's a small group.
That's a very small group. But on the other side of it, when we started off and we talked about that carnage at the Battle of Megiddo, that's right on the north side of the city of Jerusalem, crossing over, heading up towards Damascus. And you get to the Valley of Jezreel. It's an open battle. By the way, more battles have happened in the Valley of Jezreel than any other place on the planet Earth.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That is a historical fact. And so it's kind of fitting that the last battle on Earth would happen at the place where the most amount of battles are.
Yeah.
The Bible does love its symmetry.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, it really does. So those are the kinds of things. Now, I had Chris look up, and hopefully he read through 24, because Jesus says there's one thing that will happen that will mark the end time. And it's one thing that we really don't talk a whole lot about. We look at all these other signs, and when you go literally, if Daniel says he'll set a covenant for 7 years, but at the 3.5 year mark, he's going to break the covenant, which means there's still going to be 3.5 years before that 7 weeks is over. I mean, you can set a clock to that as long as we know when the clock starts ticking. And when that covenant happens, the clock will start ticking, but that just says when the end of that 7 weeks is. It doesn't necessarily say when Christ is coming back and the end is. And so I'm going to see if Chris's eyes have picked up, because Jesus is pretty clear. He says this one thing will happen, then the end.
Yeah.
Did you find it, Chris? In 24?
I'm reading through the whole thing. I had it queued up for you because I thought you would want to go through it in a timeline, so I didn't scan the whole thing to look for a specific.
Well, I'll talk a little bit more, because for our listeners, I really want them to catch this. There's a lot of people out there, and I am sincere about this, and I even press it to you two young men. Mm-hmm. This fact: there's a lot of things that we think we believe and we got it right, and it's our way of doing it. Guys, chase after God's word and forget about what other people say and everything else. Live it the best you can, because 3 times, 2 times it says it outright, 1 time it implies it. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus says, don't be deceived. Mm-hmm. And the only way for that to happen is you've got to know what God's word says, and you don't let it mess with your mind. We are entering into the age of AI.
Yeah. We're there.
Yeah, we're there, actually. It is more than entering into it. Mm-hmm. It has already happened. This isn't politics. So I don't want any of your listeners to go, oh, politics here. No, this isn't politics. It's a straight up saying that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has already been infiltrated, image captured, artificial sound in order to represent him.
Right.
And I'm just glad that there's the technology to go, yeah, that's not right. Because there's going to be tons of people that would have said, oh, I heard him say it himself. It came right out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about it just last night. Get where you're going with
that. We actually did, yeah. Chris used that article about Marco Rubio in our live show last night.
There is a time in the book of Revelation when things get so hideous, so bad, there will be a statue, and it will say that the one who was against Christ, Antichrist, will cause it to come to life. And I'm thinking, AI, baby.
Right.
AI. And Jesus in Matthew 24 says that if it's possible, and trust me, it will be possible, they will deceive the very chosen people that God has.
This is one of the reasons that I keep telling people to get your Bible and get it in analog.
Yes, because that will be another
pages.
Thing that will happen is changing God's word. It will happen. So, but of all signs, this is.
Hey, what's up, guys? I hope you're really enjoying that episode with Pastor Eric. And of course, we're going to get back to it in just a little bit. But before we do, I did want to jump in here and say that I hope that you're all having a phenomenal holiday weekend. I hope it's filled with family, food, fun, all those good things. But I did just want to jump in here. Rumble's been very good to us, and we want to be very good back to Rumble. We made the editor's picks page tonight, so that's always a fun thing. So hopefully lots of new faces in the chat. Hopefully lots of new followers tonight. Hey, if you are brand new, if you're enjoying that conversation, go ahead and hit that follow button, subscribe, depending on where you're at. And then, hey, please take the show and share it with a friend, right? I'm always more apt, I know, to click on a link and watch a video if it's shared with me by somebody that I care about. But anyway, like I said, Rumble's been good to us, and so I want to be good back to Rumble. And here's an ad that they would like for you guys to hear, and it sounds like you've probably noticed Rumble is growing fast, and it's not slowing down. They're building a real alternative to big tech that puts creators first and actually protects free speech. And now there's Rumble Premium, an easy way to upgrade your experience. With Premium, you get ad-free viewing across the platform, no pre-rolls, no interruptions like this one, just the content that you came for. Plus, Premium members unlock exclusive content like bonus videos, behind-the-scenes drops, and more from your favorite creators. Right now, Rumble is offering $10 off an annual subscription. Just go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO at checkout. That's rumble.com/premium and promo code STUDIO. No ads, more freedom and content you actually care about. That's the deal. And no, guys, like, I am really here tonight. I promise you that I am. It's just because Brandon being out, which, by the way, throw some love in the chat, say hi to Brandon. But with Brandon being out doing holiday stuff with family, we didn't want to just throw together BS content. We want to bring you guys like good quality streaming content. So that's why we decided to go back and show you one of our absolute favorite episodes with Pastor Eric. And I hope that you guys are enjoying it. So without further ado, thank you to Rumble. We'll go ahead and get this ad off the screen and get you guys back over to the episode. So I think we were at about an hour, 2 minutes and 29 seconds in. So I'll try and get you right back to where you left off. You guys have an awesome rest of your night. Love you guys so very much. Probably won't be here to see you at the end, but thank you to Rumble. Thank you to all you guys. And hope that you're having an amazing Black Friday.
It will happen. So, but of all signs, this is the one that Jesus hinges everything on. Did you find it?
Yeah, I did. I'm going to start in verse 3 and run up to it in verse 14, just because.
I'm like, yeah, I thought it was between 12 and 14. You're going to start at verse 3. Yeah. Okay.
I am, just because I think this is going to send chills up a lot of people's spines that maybe haven't read the Bible and don't know how clearly it's laid out in here.
And this is the Son of God speaking the whole time. Go ahead.
Okay.
And he says, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" I'm reading in the English Standard Version, by the way, just for anybody that wants to know. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. But all these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come."
See what the one single thing is, and it's something we don't talk about. Jesus tells us when the end will come, when this gospel is proclaimed throughout all the world to every nation. The beautiful part about that is that God is fair. Everybody will get to hear.
And that's one thing that I've seen a lot of younger Christians kind of have to wrestle with and deal with, right? The idea is, well, what about insert, some remote tribe in the deep jungles of South America that were there, between Jesus and now, that have never heard the Bible, have never gotten a chance to hear about God, but they've been living and dying the whole time. If God's so fair, if God is a loving God and is all powerful, how would he allow these people? It's the problem of evil, basically, but just
sure.
Brandon. How would God allow them, to live and die and never have an opportunity to meet Jesus Christ? If Jesus is the only way, how could a loving and fair God be that way to them?
Well, two things. Number one, you will find me when you seek me with
your whole heart.
It doesn't matter what your nationality is or anything else like that. And I got a story with you to back that up. And then number two, you never know. We have no idea of what happens in that subconscious part where somebody is about ready, their soul is ready to leave their body, leave this earth. We hear the different testimonies about, I raised up, but I could look down and my body was still there and I'm going up and whatever. We have no idea of the fairness of God before a soul is claimed. God is fair. I believe that. I hang on to that with all my heart. And he's not arbitrary. That's another fact about God and Christ that we have to come to claims with. There was a South American tribe that God was speaking to. I'll get to you how that happened. There was the tribal chief passed away, but in his dying days he told his son if he wanted to be a great chief that he needed to find the one great God. So with all this young man's heart, he's trying to find the one great God, the one great God. He has a dream one night that just outside of the tribal area, if they would cut down all the trees, then the great God would come and talk to him, or he would come and he would learn of him. And so for over a year, he had the men of his tribe hack down and have this field of tree stumps outside of his village. A guy that I know personally, I knew him very late in life, in his 80s, but he was a missionary. He got on a plane, was supposed to be going down to Guyana, British Guyana, off of the north coast of South America, and he was supposed to be flying down there for some missions thing. He had a guy who has a reputation for being a crazy pilot, but he
is that duct tape?
you kind of. Yeah, that kind of a thing. And he gets on the guy's plane, and he's supposed to fly him down there, and a couple of major headstorms happen, and he tries to fly around them, and they just change and blow him off course. And the next thing you know, he gets nailed with lightning, and he's got to put the plane down. And he's like, I have nowhere where I'm at. It's an older plane. We're, not the type of transponders and things they have today. And he's like, I am off course. And he goes, we got to put her down. He said, we got problems. And they looked, they were flying low enough, and sure enough, there was a field. And so he puts it down in the field. And as they put it down in the field, and it's kind of raining and thundering, and they come walking off, these white people do, off of this plane, and all of a sudden you got these tribes people that start coming out of the woods to meet them. And you're wondering, are we going to get eaten? This is South America. What's going to happen? This is the middle of the jungle. The chief steps forward and he says, he can speak English, are you the one to tell us about the great God?
Wow.
If you seek him, he can be found. God is fair. And that's exactly what I mean by it. That happened in the 1960s.
Yeah, I've heard that story before, actually. That's crazy. It's amazing. It's a different kind of field of dreams.
Absolutely. But I can see why you would say that. So in our eschatology, you've got this one thing, and I don't know, maybe how long have we gone on for tonight?
Just an hour.
Just an hour? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing, so we've brought up the different things that are in vogue, in play right now, that the scriptures very distinctly describe. Now we're heading into those things that it describes, but can you see them happening? So I kind of alluded to one, but let's go through the first 3.5 years of this time period called tribulation. There's going to be sacrifices. We can see with our own eyes how that can happen really quickly. But at the same time, they can still end up building a temple. Either way. But in that middle of that 3.5 years, and in that first 3.5 years, there are these two dudes that are supposed to come, and they are going to literally annoy the entire world. Annoy them. To the point they're going to be calling out things that are sinful. And we're already having problems with this, and that is what right seems to be wrong. What is good can seem to be bad. Can you guys believe this? You heard about the drownings. It breaks my heart down in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to live
right there. I know.
For a year. Yeah.
And so the thing that bothers me is, do you know that there were two, I will say, I won't call them government workers, but both of them were at least some form of public figure, not high level, but public figures, but big enough to make a comment that, oh my goodness, they were MAGA people. I guess they got what they had coming to them.
Yeah, I've seen
that was
this
the paraphrase.
Yeah, it's a paraphrase, but and both of them were fired.
Disgusting. Yeah.
That I don't care what side of the aisle you fall down on. How can children were killed?
Yes.
You got no.
Camp Mystic.
One of them was a pediatrician. Children were killed. How does a pediatrician say that? What's in your mind? So anyway, there's this kind of foolishness, and stuff like that. Right's wrong, wrong is right. Well, these guys are going to start pointing it out. It's going to make the world mad. And after 3.5 years of preaching, 3.5 years, nobody can touch them. But after 3.5 years, they will be killed. Their blood and their bodies will literally lay in the streets for 3.5 days. During that 3.5 days, the world will be so happy that people will send each other gifts, thanking the other, not God, thanking the other that we finally got rid of these guys. At the end of the 3.5 days, after the 3.5 years, their bodies are literally going to stand up and right in front of everybody. And by the way, we have these guys now, right? So at any given time, if they've got them on, any of us can be on Facebook Live and watch it anywhere around the world. And we're going to watch them ascend into heaven. Now, you would think that would spook enough people that somebody would fall on their knees and say, God, I'm wrong, forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, not going to happen. But can you see the world we're setting up now? TDS, other things, even the anti-Semitism that we're seeing, which literally is hating somebody for their skin or their blood ethnicity. Right? Don't we say that that's wrong in America? Just on a human level, isn't that wrong? I mean, I don't hate the Muslims because of their DNA. I don't hate them at all. But I definitely don't pick them out because of their DNA or anything like that. I don't hate the Irish because they're redheaded. No, not all of them. But, you know, I don't do that. They're human beings.
Right.
Why is anti-Semitism on the rise? They're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's the thinking that'll be going on. We're literally setting up our world right now. That will not be a strange thing that the hate of the world will end up falling on these two people. TDS, baby. You know, let's just go that route. TDS. Because who wants their sins called out in front of everybody? And they will get killed over it.
Especially if they're calling out the sins of of governments and large businesses.
Yeah, they are.
Things like that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they are.
And I would imagine, because I've read that scripture many times, that when they're calling these things out, that they're going to, because they're the two prophets, right, or who you're
yes.
talking about, that they're going to be speaking things and uncovering things that no person should have the knowledge of. And they'll be talking about them, and this is just my imagination. I'm speculating, but
you're on.
To hate them so much, like, imagine if these two guys would be able to look at, and as they talk, and they're like, and now we're going to talk about everything that went down, in the, let's just say, the Epstein circle. And all of the
Oval Office,
the US
any time period, whatever Oval Office, doesn't matter.
Or the Israeli government, or any other government that had anything to do with it, and they just start blasting the actual truth out, and people in little cubicles are going to be like, how the heck would they know that? We've kept this buried for decades.
Downing Street, the Pentagon.
Like
I mean, pick your place. It doesn't matter, and they will call it out. And and that's why the hate is going to go on so strong. So something a little interesting about these two guys, speculation on who they are. The Bible says it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. So we're looking at people who haven't seen death. Now, there's two that we know of. That's Elijah, the prophet, and Enoch. Now, personally, I don't think that's who the two of them are going to be, and there's a reason for that. I think that the two of them are going to be Elijah and Moses. Everybody says, well, Moses died and whatever. Well, listen, Moses and God were on that mountain. Nobody else was. God says, my servant Moses is dead. I got that. But if God takes you out of this world, are you alive?
I mean, how interesting to the nation of Israel, too, for somebody to come back and claim that they are Moses, who led them out of the promised land. That would send just ripples through what the paradigm and the worldview of the Jewish nation would be, especially if he comes back and he starts preaching that actually that Jesus guy was right. And then you see how that's going to that would throw such a wrench in the gears of two of the biggest mono religions.
Oh, sure.
Monotheistic religions, excuse me.
Now, there's no doubt that the other one is Elijah. No doubt whatsoever. Every theologian will tell you it's Elijah. And here's the big deal on Elijah. At Passover, when you have the Seder dinner, do you know by tradition they leave one empty chair at every Seder dinner? Do you know who that empty chair is for?
The prophet
Elijah. They believe Elijah is going to return, and they set a chair for him in expectation that it may be their house that he returns to.
So you laid out why you think it's Moses, but why don't you think it's Enoch?
Only because I think it's Moses. Obviously, Enoch can fill the position. He did not die. We're told that he was translated. God took him. Although his body would not be in a holy heaven. It's his soul that God took. So exactly the same, thing with Moses. And the other thing is that there is a special place in God's heart for Enoch, for he is the only one who has lived this life perfectly, because that's what he was rewarded for. Took him, and now, so just want everybody to know that it is possible to live this life perfectly unto God. Only took Enoch 316 years.
I don't know if I'll live that long.
Only 316 years. But he finally got it right.
Yeah.
To the point that where God said, just come on up to heaven. You're already living it. Go ahead.
If they're on the verge of being able to set up the temple, to be able to, or the tabernacle, whatever it is, and be able to do these sacrifices, what is in the chain of events the next thing that's supposed to happen once they start performing these sacrifices on these pure red heifers?
Well, the red heifer can be done at any point in time as long as the heifer makes the requirement. 3 years old, never been set.
365 years.
I was wrong. It's not 316. 365.
365.
Oh, okay. Gosh, so it took him a little longer than I thought.
Even longer, which only backs up your
point. Exactly. So the heifers, as long as they are 3 months old, never been put to a plow. Not 3 months. I'm sorry. 3 years old, never been put to the plow. And obviously it has to be a heifer, and it has to be pure. And then at that point, they can be sacrificed and incinerated down to the ashes, and the ashes can be kept. So there's nothing stopping that.
Yeah, no, and I get that. What I'm saying is, once they start doing that, what prophecy is that fulfilling to where there's, in the order of things to come, what should come after that once that starts happening? Does that make sense?
Well,
the
next domino will what we're waiting for is whoever that world leader is that has authority over the Temple Mount to make a covenant with Israel that they can do the sacrifices there. That's what we're waiting on. When that happens, the clock is actually ticking. We know what year at that point when that covenant is made.
Right.
We're told that's the beginning of the 7 years.
Right.
The last 7 years. The other mark will be in the middle of it. He'll break the covenant in 3.5 years.
And now we're talking about tribulation.
Well, the 7 years is the beginning of that is considered tribulation.
Mm-hmm. Right, because then the Antichrist will stop the sacrifices by desecrating the altar again.
Mm-hmm. And it is the altar, and the altar already exists, not the ark. It's the altar. Right.
So the Elijah and perhaps Moses are preaching. They are dead in the street for 3.5 days, and they come back to life and ascend to heaven. From that point forward, what's going on? I sort of derailed you with my question, so I'm just trying to get you back on track.
Yeah. Well, I was going to talk about the interesting point because you see, Moses and Elijah has already appeared. And it's the most hilarious thing. I see humor in the Bible in a lot of places where people don't, and it's stuff that we should laugh about. But so it's called the Mount of Transfiguration, and they appear to Christ. And we're specifically told that it's Moses and Elijah. And the only way that you're going to know that it's Moses and Elijah, we don't have pictures, we don't have anything else, is that there's Peter, James, and John. They are there. And they hear Jesus call them by name. Oh, so that's Peter and that's John, or that's Moses and that's Elijah. Oh,
yeah, I'm sure Moses cared much less who Peter and John were. These are the 12.
These are part of them. Seriously?
All right. Yeah.
Seriously? So the funny part is
Bush League over here,
is that they are telling Jesus how he will die. You're like, what's the humor in that? Two dudes that never saw death are going to tell Jesus how he's going to die. You can't find the irony in that somewhere? You know, Moses, I'd ask you what this is going to feel like, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't know.
You don't know. That is ironic.
But Jesus, this is how you're going to die. You're going to get, they're going to put nails in you. Oh, that sounds painful. Can't help you, dude.
Probably. I've seen the Romans do this to other people. They don't seem to enjoy it.
Yeah. Like I say,
swipe left on that.
This is serious, dark humor. But at the same time, the irony, it's not wasted on me. Two guys that didn't see death going to tell Jesus how he's going to die. I really think that God's got something in that. So then afterwards, though, now these are the two guys who eventually see death in the middle of a street, and in a very, very cruel way. But God uses that for his end time stuff. Okay, so last 3.5 years are the worst years on earth. Absolutely worst.
Yeah,
you still got Matthew 24 up? You might as well read what it's going to be like.
Keep going.
Beginning in verse 29. Yep. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. Actually, let me back up a little bit. I'll back up and get a running start on this. So, the abomination of desolation, verse 15.
That's what stops the sacrifice in the temple. Okay.
When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. Excuse me, I can read, I promise. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. So he's saying right here, like, Project Bluebeam and other conspiracy theories aside, when it's me and I come back, in the same way that lightning cracks over here and you see it all the way over there, there will be no denying. Nobody will be able to deny what we're seeing. And people, it's the same way like you talked last time about demonology, when you talked about that encounter, that you saw it, you heard it, but you felt it because it was a spiritual thing and you just couldn't deny what you were in the presence of. I mean, how much more will it be for the Son of God that people, when they look at him, will not even be able to lie to themselves, because where Jesus is, sin can't be there. And so people won't even be able to deny in themselves what they're seeing when it's actually him, and he comes back and stands in front of them. You know what I mean? That's the way I make that make sense to me. I didn't want to say interpret because I don't have that. That's how I make it make sense.
No, let's just. Can we all agree? Here is Jesus himself. This is how bad it's going to be. So the book of Revelations gives us a little bit more inclination, chapters 12, 13, 14. So after these guys go and he breaks the covenant of them being able to do sacrifices on the temple, so now we start getting this, and Jesus said, it's only 3.5 years, so the time's going to be cut short, or man just wouldn't make it. And you've got, this is the time where the Antichrist, and he literally gets wounded, I believe, in the head, or we assume that it's in the head. I can't remember now 100% off the top of my head. Anyway, and it's going to happen so that the whole world can see it. And in the process of that, it will look like he's been raised up from the dead. And so that's why people are going to look at him as a Christ. And that's going to be one of the things. He's going to be able to take this statue and he's going to be able to make it talk. and people will fall down and worship the statue, which is idolatry, and will end up worshiping him, and he will have the power to do all these different kinds of things. It's going to be some pretty stinking incredible times. We're going to see things that demons won't have to hide behind a tree. We'll see some of the most incredible spiritual things that will be real, but they will be from the demonic, and they'll just come right out into the open because of a time period that's being set up right now. And that is that people are hungry to see God move. So when it comes to seeing spiritual things, but they'll get to the place where they won't be able to discern between something being a spiritual good or a spiritual evil. And they'll recognize it and just say, "Oh, that's amazing," and they'll worship that kind of stuff, and that stuff will just come right out into the open. And that's why in Matthew 24, 3 times, like I said, 2 times outright, 1 time by innuendo, Jesus is talking about don't be deceived. Don't be deceived.
It's so important that he gives us his words too, because in here he makes the statement, "This is why I'm telling you what will happen." And it goes back to why I keep telling people, get a Bible that has actual pages and read that, because when it comes to the end, the modern American church is so rife with getting the methods of proving theology just completely upside down, because it's supposed to go by the scripture first, then by the tradition of the church universal, and then at the very bottom by your personal experiences with God. Because when you're rooted in the scripture and then you're rooted in tradition, when God reveals himself to you, people talk about, and I felt like God was telling me inside, or I felt God leading me to do this, or things like that. You'll be able to take it back to the scripture and go, is this thing that I feel like God is leading me to do, is this a scriptural thing, or am I just being deceived by something?
Yes.
But when the American church has flipped it upside down and it's all about what makes you feel good, or your personal experiences with God, and then the Bible has nothing to do with it, these are the people that when they see this stuff, they're going to think that they're perfectly church-going Americans. They're going to think they go to church every Sunday, probably sit on the deacon boards, like whatever it is, but when they see this stuff, because they've gotten their theology so upside down in how they weight it, they're going to be like, well, this feels right to me. I feel like God is leading me. I mean, look at these signs and wonders that he's doing. He wouldn't be able to do that if he wasn't God, right? But it's the people that are able to have the faith to go, no, it says here in Matthew 24, I don't care what that guy does. He could turn water into Miller Lite all day, like, I don't care, because when Jesus comes back, it says that nobody will be able to deny, and like the lightning cracks from one side to the other, everybody will know. Right? And that's not going to happen yet, because I'm reading here in Matthew 24, and these things that you're doing and these miracles that you're trying to show me, God already told me that you were going to do that. And they're going to look at you when you stand on your principles, and they're going to hate you for it, and they're going to call you old-fashioned. They're going to call you a conspiracy theorist. They're going to say, oh, you believe that book that was written by, all the arguments that we hear about the Bible, a book written by sinful men over 2,000 years ago,
1,500.
Like, this is just, but it's really funny, because the same argument is just going to be, listen, did God really say that was going to happen?
Where have I heard that before?
that's my entire point. But again, Jesus is telling us right here, this is why I'm telling you what's going to happen. So that when you see these things, you'll know, because I've prepped you for it.
That's absolutely right.
It's still going to be incumbent upon us. And I truly believe, I wasn't sure when I was a kid, but I truly believe that, people that are alive today are going to be here to see some of this awful tribulation happen. Like we're going to be here, and we're going to live through parts of it 100%, right? So, and it's going to be incumbent upon us to plant your feet, right, and stand in faith, and having that much faith when like literally the entire world is coming against you is going to be the hardest thing in the world to do. And I mean, Jesus said that too. He said that in the passage that I just read. If the days weren't cut short, nobody would make it.
Well, so we're talking when talking about the Antichrist, this person, the individual of the Antichrist. Is there anything that describes, like, to say, well, this person meets this metric and this metric and this metric, leading up to making a statue that talks, that will say, like, this person is meeting all of these different, I guess, marks to identify them as the Antichrist, where they come from, things that, you know, do you get what I'm saying? Like, is there...
we don't know where he's going to come from, and so trust me, the speculation, he's going to be out of the Catholic Church, he's going to be from Russia,
he's sitting in the White House right now.
Yes, he's the Antichrist. He's sitting in the White House right
Napoleon, the Antichrist.
Sure. And so nationally, whatever, all we know is the picture that we get is that he is a leader. He is exalted to leadership. In this leadership, he is able to, we believe that he is the one that will broker the deal for the sacrifices on the Temple Mount, and that he's going to be the one to break them. We do know that he will have worldwide power in order that he will be able to do this thing that nobody will be able to buy and sell unless they take on a particular mark or his name. His name shall be the same as the number of 666. So that's what we're getting. I have no idea on how to interpret that. I've heard all different kinds of interpretation on that, and I kind of laugh. It's like, that I see what you're getting at, but you know what? I think you're doing more damage grasping at straws than you are. Let's leave it a mystery. And let's be a little bit more sure. Quit grasping at straws and going, oh yeah, it's the sixth number letter and the sixth number and the sixth one. Yeah, no, it'll become like the rest of the stuff that we're seeing, and how things can be set up, and we're watching ourselves cruise out to here. It'll be the same thing for that. It'll become apparent. But will we remember this prophecy when that happens? That's one of the scary things to me, is like, will we see it? And and here's a hard thing, it's going to be, it's for the betterment of the world. We're back to, right now, world globalization is being blown up. I love it, but it will come back around. And actually, it'll come back around in a smaller way, because we're told that one of the other things that will happen is something will come in and will poison a third of the earth's waters, a third of the fresh waters, a third of the oceans, a third of the world's lands, and they will be good for nothing. Well, now you've just...
Looking at you, China.
Now you've just lessened the world by 1/3, and only 2/3 of the world is now into play. And we do know the one part that will always be into play is the Middle East, because that's what the Bible centers itself around, and that's what is here, and that's what is tracked. So you kind of makes you think, one of the things I've come to the conclusion of, the only thing that makes America so strong, it's not the only thing, the two things that make America strong is the land and the people. If anybody wants to do something to America, you have got to separate those two. You've got to take the people away from the land. Is that feasible by any army strategy? No. Taking the people away from the land is not. The other one would be take the land away from the people. Now, what do you got? Okay, so and there's even though we can feed the world twice, and if we end up taking on Saskatchewan and Alberta for our 51st and 52nd state, we'll end up being able to feed the world 4 times. But the point is if you're going to defeat America, you've got to separate the people and the land, and we can't take the people off the land. So you know what? scar the land. And there will be people crazy enough that will be how they do it. And so it makes total sense to me where we are in the world that would be how it would happen. And so that's another thing that is prophesied in that book. So you got globalism coming back, and you can see if you just have the Middle East, the north of Africa, part of Europe, that 2/3 of the world between the Eurasian continents, and that's what's really playing in history. It's not hard to see how you can get globalism back if that's all that's in play. Not hard at all. So makes total sense.
The mark of the beast doesn't seem that crazy to anybody that lived through COVID. I never thought that I was going to live in the United States where I had to show my papers if I was going to get from one state to another. That was absolutely insane.
I was just doing insurance stuff, and yet I had a letter from the Secretary of State of the United States that was copied to me so that I could travel around and do insurance work. I was considered an essential employee. Have no idea how doing insurance work is an essential employee, but we got it.
You keep scamming people, you know.
Yeah. But I got that letter, and I was told to keep it on me at all times. I have my letters. Mm-hmm. I have my papers.
And it's for one of these reasons too, since we're talking about the prophecies, that as I look at things, you know, because we're talking about the Antichrist, and in Revelation, because a lot of it is written in metaphor. And a lot. No,
I think a lot of it is literal. That's what I'm getting at nowadays. But go ahead.
You guys should hash that out. What you think is metaphorical and what you think is literal, because that's really interesting.
There really are things that are metaphorical. I got to tell him that, because when you talk about a dragon,
that's where I was going. I was getting ready to talk about the beast.
Go ahead, Chris. Okay. Let's talk.
Right. No, but I mean it's fine. So I agree with you completely that when it talks about timeline and events and things to happen,
they will happen.
That is literal.
Yeah.
You know, I agree with you on those points. But then when John the Revelator, describes the beast with 10 heads and on the heads are 10 horns, right? And they represent the 10 kingdoms that will be like those are the parts where I think that he's writing like in a metaphor to describe the conglomerate, right? And whatever that is. And I've long been of the opinion, as I'm looking at globalism, which is where the segue for this came from, that when it comes to, you know, the end time prophecies, a lot of people have speculated for a long time, which are the 10 kingdoms, or what are they going to be? Is it going to be Persia and Israel and China, and, you know, or is it going to be, and they start like racking and stacking 10 countries that are going to exist. And then I kind of looked around and I was like, well, in a globalistic world where all of a sudden countries' borders now become very porous because we have mass migration, nation states don't mean so much. What is something that a great leader would be able to, you know, to have underneath of him that would represent 10 kingdoms that then he would be able to use to control the world? And then I started thinking about multinational corporations and how strong they are. And then I started thinking, what if you had one that was basically media entertainment, something like a Disney, right? Something that was information, like your Google, right, which is running like all your AI, something that is basically your logistics, right, that can move things from here to there, like an Amazon, something that is your food, right, your food and distribution growing, that would be like a Monsanto. And then it starts becoming easier when you start thinking about like what would the 10 strongest mega corporations in the world be, that if one person was in charge of all 10 of these, then it would represent the 10 kingdoms that he is able to basically control down on nation states and go, hey, without if you don't have, remember the COVID card, well, if you don't have the barcode, then you can't get into the WeChat style app, you can't buy food, right? Because and it's going to come in ways like security. Hey, I know everything's on your phone, but that phone can be stolen from you, and then people can steal your identity. You know what can't be stolen from you? If we implant this thing on you, we know 100% that that's you. That will secure your bank account, your global credits, like whatever it is, and now they're tied, to you. We already see how Amazon, they have one up here in Seattle where it's like you walk in, and it's cashless and there's no cashiers. When you walk up and grab things off the shelf, it just deducts it from your Amazon cart and you walk right out the door with it. How convenient, how safe. Isn't it cool? Wouldn't you like your entire world to be this convenient like this for just every day? You don't have to buy, but you got to have the Amazon app, and in order to have the Amazon app, you got to have, because that's how it ties your money to your identity and like who you are. And then we can get into social credit score and like all that jazz about how certain people can be frozen out of society completely because it's like, oh, I heard that guy say something super based about how Jesus is king or whatever, and all of a sudden you wake up one day. Yeah, right, or whatever. You wake up one day and you had 100 credits in your bank account yesterday, but today you have 0.
Sorry, citizen.
Sorry. Yeah, like your views have been deemed unacceptable, right? And so it's just like you all I'm doing is I'm throwing fuel on your fire about this world that the Bible talks about. A lot of people were just like, I don't know how it's going to get there. I don't know, but now you can start to see the through lines.
Correct.
And you can see the trajectory, and you're like, that is not that weird to say anymore.
It's there was a time prior to COVID that I'd say, oh man, I can see it. It's not that far off. After COVID, it's here.
Well, think about Palantir. Peter Thiel, right? The interview go ahead, Chris.
I was sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm on a roll. And then also it's like you talking about in the beginning how we live in a completely post-truth society now, because you brought up the Robo Rubio story, right? And so it's like you're going to get communications, see videos on your phone, on your tablet, everybody's going to be walking around with those VR goggles here eventually. So it's like it's just in your face all day, every day, and you're going to see videos.
And by the way, I love Trump, baby. I really do.
Okay, you're going to see videos and you're going to see articles and like all this stuff, and it's like you're not even talking to real people. You're just a complete and total like Matrix style slave of the algorithm, and it's just all AI driven all the time. I had to ask my wife, I was like, are you prepared to live in a world where somebody can just grab any picture of me that exists on the internet, use it, have AI render me doing unspeakable things with other people, send it to you and go, hey, did you know that this was your husband 2 days ago? And it's going to look so real that are you prepared to live in a world where you and I have enough trust that if I look at you and go, that is fake, that is not me, I did not do that, I would never do that to you? Because that type of thing would be so scarring to see. This person that you love and they're your best
easy
friend.
To manipulate people that way.
And then how do you look at that and yet have enough faith in somebody to go, you know what, that hurt to watch, but I know that's not you. It's like, yeah, no, that wasn't me. And we already see this happening in the real world because it's post-truth. And so how much harder is it going to be for somebody, for all this stuff that we've talked about here in Matthew chapter 24, to go, no, I know what the Bible said, and I'm choosing to believe that no matter what you show me. You're going to be a crazy person. They're going to say that you're crazy.
Yeah. We're experiencing a lot of you say post-truth. Man, that really nails it where we are. But psychologically, what kind of damage does white lies do? For about 10 years, I walked around asking people this question: what happens to a culture when its science lies to it?
Doesn't have an agreed set of truths anymore.
But see, that's science. Science doesn't have to be an agreed set of truths. Science is empirical. It either is or it isn't. I.e., 1 equals 1. 1 is not 1.0001. 1 is 1. It's an empirical truth. It is exact. It has to be. It can't be above. It can't be below. But tell me, are eggs good for you this week?
Mm-hmm.
Is chocolate good for you? Is chocolate good for you this week? Is more than one cup of coffee good for you this week? If I could tell you how many times from the time I was 20 and 30 to hear a study say that eggs are not good for you this week. Oh, but they are back to being good to you this week. They're not being
edible egg.
Yes, that whole campaign. So which one is it? But it depends on which one the people choose. So is Trump anti-constitutional, even though every time a court has done a ruling on him, he has obeyed the court and become subservient to the ruling of the court until it is changed by a higher court? But he's anti-constitutional, right?
You want a funny thread to run down? Go look at.
And I'm not trying to be political, but what I am being is what people believe in truth.
Right.
And it is measurable. Well, but I don't believe that. Then how do you deal with the Word of God when we already got talking about don't be deceived, and all of a sudden these other people or this guy is going to come through and he's going to do some of the most incredible, the most miraculous thing, and there's this old man, wise guy that's standing next to you and said that's not Jesus. What do you know, old man? Look at what we just saw. No, that's not Jesus. What do you know? You're old. Your religion's gone. It doesn't matter what you. But the Bible says that when Jesus comes back, he's coming back as a king, not as this guy walking around doing miracles. He's already done that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the elect. But we're cultivating that culture right now. I wish there was a way that every time any politician, Republican or otherwise, starts stretching the truth so that they can twist it to make it look like the way they want to. I wish that, underneath their seat we had a little electrical gigger. Well, maybe it won't be like that. Whatever. I wish there was something that we can do instead of protecting their right to lie, because the way that they do this is killing us as a country.
Well, you would have thought that the abundance of information would disabuse everybody of these lies or the stretching of the truth, but it seems to have only created more confusion. And it's because of the democratization of information that's happened, and then also the way that information has become digital and it can now be changed and manipulated, and the also way that people look to these institutions. Chris and I have had this conversation on the podcast before, how democracy, right? And I say democracy just in the general consensus sort of way, has become not just the democracy of the individual group of people, but the democracy of the institution is what matters more. The decision consensus of the institution, the authoritarian institution, is now the powerful thing, not the people. And so there's people look at these things and they say, like, keep with your example of COVID, well, I'm going to go with Dr. Fauci, and I'm going to say that, yes, he's saying this, and we have to social distance, and, if you just get the vaccine and the booster one more time, we're all going to be okay, but we all got to do this at the same time. So the way that information now has become abundant, and then also the way humans have this inherent need, I think, to look at somebody to tell them what to do, it's become this dangerous cocktail of manipulation and so much information that you can't even interpret it. And then hey, I see the problem you guys have interpreting all this information. I got you. This is what it actually means. And people say, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying this. I'm just going to do this. And now I don't have to do any thinking. You can do the thinking for me, and I'll just do what you say. And that's what we've come down to, because it has become so difficult to sift through all of this information because of the internet to find what reality is. Because like you said, just you keep using your example with like eggs or coffee. Well, it's like you go online, is this actually okay? Well, you've got 200 peer-reviewed essays and all this other stuff, and some say this and some say this, and then at the end of it, there's just like, well, you just got to figure out what's best for you. And it's like, well, okay, well, maybe if I spend this amount of time figuring what's best for me, something bad is going to happen. I don't want to make this decision, and now you've got analysis paralysis. It's just, there's just so many things that go on. And so you would think, to go back to your original point, that having the internet and all of this abundance of information at your fingertips would help, but it hasn't at all. It's like being in a library, but you can't read. You're just surrounded by all this information. You can't do anything with it. It immobilizes you.
Well, let me ask you this, your opinion, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. Is it laziness? You pointed that out. Or is it volume? You pointed that out.
I think that it's both. I think that the volume almost de-incentivizes the need to go and look, or maybe not the need, but it de-incentivizes somebody's motivation to go and look, because it's like, well, man, I'm almost overwhelmed by the amount of decisions I have here. I'm just going to not do anything.
Volume.
And right, exactly. And so I think that there is, because you could go and look at everything and make a decision yourself, right? But there are people that look and say, oh my gosh, there's just so much. I'm just going to pick whatever Sally did and take her recommendation, and you have no idea if Sally spent any amount of time looking at anything or she did what John said, right? And so I think it's both. I think that people become overwhelmed by the amount of information, so it's volume. And then I think that there are the people who want the easy solutions, so they go on TikTok and they find Joan's, herbal life TikTok page who says that, colloidal silver is good in your oatmeal and will also help with your eyesight. And yeah, so it's just, there's just so much. I think it's both. Human beings are inclined to be lazy when they don't know how to research or don't know what to do, and I think too that the volume gives people analysis paralysis. Like, I've talked about this so much, I don't know what the hell to do anymore, because it's just like I've got 500 different answers here, and they all seem somewhat right, but none of them point to a conclusion that I can find enough consensus on, so to speak, to make the most accurate decision I can make for whatever it is that you're looking at.
Well, let me now let me break it down into something else, and it might be interesting for our audience to hear about this. So what we're really doing is, as we're talking about this prophecy, this eschatology, this is where I'm taking it. So let me, for our audience, keep it in this framework of that, and the culture, and how the culture, and by the way, God is behind that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in all that happens, remember, he is allowing this to happen. So he's putting the salt and pepper on it, if you want it that way. He's putting the fertilizer on it, whichever way you want to do it. And so this culture is emerging that he is going to use for his purpose. And that's why I'm getting ready to bring it down then. So let's scrape off that upper half in age, and let's talk about these college kids for just a second. And because they're in 20 years, now do you see why I'm picking on them? Where is our thinking going in 20 years? Our hippies coming out of the 60s and 70s came around a little bit, although I am amazed at some of these protests, seeing the 60 and 70-year-olds, gray-haired people that are out there, and you're like, did you not learn anything back then? But I think they all moved out to Washington. So anyway, in California. And I really don't mean that as a joke. I'm serious.
Oh no, it's not a joke. Yeah, I live here.
Yeah, and so you have that, but what is, so I'm seeing Ivy League schools, kids on the grounds at Ivy League schools, not in the classroom, doing the protests. Ivy League schools, as I recall in the 60s and 70s, did not lead the nation in protests. And they are so ignorant of the situation of what they're protesting for that I'm wondering, how are they getting a degree? And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding about that either. That's because the essence of the ignorance of what they're protesting is saying they cannot be doing well in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're using the
AI has killed education.
Sure, but they're using the competence of currency, the currency of the competence that's supposed to be attributed to these Ivy League schools, to throw it on top of these protests and say, well, see, look, it's Columbia, it's Yale, it's Harvard, they're protesting, right, and they got into these schools. So don't you think that you should pay a little bit more attention to it? Because this is supposed to be the most educated people in our country, are the ones that are going to achieve the highest level of education. And look, they're protesting here. And they're borrowing from that sort of competence currency that comes from going to these schools, when in reality, if you look at the numbers, these are the most ideologically captured institutions in the United States. Academia is primarily liberal, not even traditionally liberal anymore, just the modern left, a postmodernist left, right? Yeah. That's ideologically captured by that. So it's not even this, John Stuart Mill marketplace of ideas that what a college should be anymore. It's just a mill house of one idea, and they process and kick these kids out, and now they're just citing all the same crap, so they're just making a certain sort of person now. And so that's why, they look at these schools and they use the name of the school to to sort of like add to the gravitas of these protests and say, well, they're just and also intelligent, right? Because these are the kids at Columbia, or these are the kids at Harvard.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And then on top of that, not to dumb it down too much, but they quite literally started making up fields of study for people to be experts.
Yeah.
So that they could argue, like you were talking about, Brandon, argue from a place of authority, right? I am the world's foremost expert in
decolonizing dance.
Yeah.
I'm decolonizing,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
wait a
minute. We make the jokes about underwater basket weaving and stuff like that, but they'll come out and they'll be like, I got a PhD in African American women's studies. You're like, what does that mean? And they sure.
Well, do you know how many I had to date in order to get that degree? No.
It's all research.
But they'll say that, and then if you ask them, they'll be able to, spit off chapter and verse of like the liberal jargon around it, and then when you parse through what they're saying, you're like, you've actually said nothing.
Well, these are the people that look at the appeal to authority fallacy as the truth, right? Well, it's in a book somebody wrote that says PhD next to their name, so it must be true, and that's kind of their whole it's kind of their whole point. Well, when you flood the market with PhDs in deconstructing the colonial thought of the apple farm, right, or whatever, and now this person's an expert in this, and that person says, well, back during the colonial period, it was a white agrarian, somewhat capitalist society, and that has just carried on through, and it's now evil, and therefore I said this. And somebody says, well, it's in a book written by a PhD who got a degree in it, and that degree is from Columbia, and therefore it's right. Whether it doesn't matter, well, let's follow this logic train to its end. It doesn't make any sense. Well, that doesn't mean anything, because you're not looking to think beyond what you're reading. You're just looking to read something and then take it for what it is at its word. And then now it's kind of like what you were saying at the beginning of the podcast about, well, I don't care. I'm just somebody said this is reality, so this is reality. I don't need to think. I just am fine with appealing to somebody else's authority and then using it as my own sort of currency to make an argument or say something is reality because somebody's name says John Smith PhD, and therefore it's the truth. So if I flood the market with all these people, then, well, now I've created chaos with a PhD at the end of it, you know?
Post-hole digger.
It's having it's having real world implications that we all have to live with. A lot of people said, you know, it's like, oh, well, they're college kids. The argument was when they get out in the real world, you know, they'll be tempered by reality. But then, you know,
that's where I'm going next.
That line of thinking has become so pervasive that applications to, you know, Johns Hopkins School of Medicine are now being decided based on immutable characteristics because of things like affirmative action. And then when you looked at some of the policies that were being rolled out during COVID, I remember that they were actually trying to suggest that we should give people precedent in the line to get COVID vaccines based on their ethnicities. You remember this? And it was like, we're not going to decide whether, you know, who needs it the most. It's not the elderly. It's not, you know, should we look at these populations? What is the science telling us? They were like, no, we have to base it on harder. Right, you know, because of racism or something. Like,
well, and then there was
it's
also
having real world implications.
That people, only the vaccinated should get medical care. That was another one.
I remember that.
Which is
So
gross.
in our visionary look, we paint this picture of eschatology. We paint this picture in what is told to us about Daniel. We look over in Revelation. We see the prophets. We see the mark of the beast. We see all these different kinds of things that are coming into being. We hear how the world is going to be so offended by these two guys that when they're gone, they finally give gifts. And as I pointed out, you know, about a pediatrician that would be somewhat, man, I hate even saying gleeful, but the children were lost. And that was just one person. We haven't gotten there, but in the cultivation of this younger generation, that's what I'm taking a look at. Can you visionarily see, oh my gosh, all of this is playing into what's going to happen 15, 20 years from now when these guys are out of college and they are setting up the new women's study DEI department in IBM, or at Google, or Amazon is taking on these particular policies. And I'm not far off. Look at what we've just come through, policies that had just been taken down, but you don't think that we won't go back there because this particular generation is going to say, well, I'm not going to work for you if you don't, and you know, if we don't go this particular direction or whatever. And I mean, we're already seeing that, and how much that
Can't
is
kill an idea.
No, you can't. And how much that is what God is allowing. We're seeing this on the campuses, but what does that mean for the picture and what he is going to allow when that day, when those days come? Though they're going to be the hospital workers, administrators, executive directors, and some of them are just going to be the cashiers and everything else, you know, that they're not going to make it into the stuff, but that volume, and they're going to have children, although be it less than what everybody else does, because they're either still going to be an abortion or limited type of birth control, but nonetheless, they're going to press it on to other kids, and it's going to become more of our lawmakers in the United States are going to be a part of that as the older ones get out and all this kind of stuff. And I can see how that's going to end up shaping the world so that literally there will be a day where demons don't have to hide behind trees. They can just come walking on out, and then people will say, oh my goodness, did you see that? That's a demon. Oh, well, it's not that bad. Come on. He's got Bud Light. You know, anyway, if you remember the commercials.
He's got a chainsaw.
But he's got Bud Light.
Yeah.
We laugh, but that's exactly the thinking that is going on. And then we don't even, I on the news or anything, I don't hear anybody making a statement because maybe it just sounds too virtuous. I don't know. But where lying is getting us. You know, we want to call this person out on a lie. Well, is that my guy? If it's my guy, I don't know that I want to call him out on a lie. Okay. But if it's not my guy, I was just watching this the other day. And for any of us that know that, you know, hey, I'd like to thank Bongino. I'd like to thank, who's our DOJ guy, Kash Patel. You know, I'd like to think that these guys would, Pam Bondi's DOJ, Patel's, FBI. I would like to think that these guys are clear. I'll get you that stuff. We're bringing it out into the public. We'll get you that stuff. Hey, you know what? Guess who's lying to us? Where is it? Right? And as much as I find within myself, man, I like those guys. You know, I just don't want to talk about it. But it's the same thing. If we're going to treat them the same, we're going to hold them to the same level of honesty that we were expecting. Yeah, so you get what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. You said you were going to do it. Or you said it was this way, then it's this way. No, we have a tendency to change things. And then we look within ourselves and we go, well, I like hearing it from them, but I don't like hearing it from them.
It's just like anything. It's brinkmanship, right? I'm going to do this and see what I can get away with. And what I don't get away with, I'm going to back it up just a little bit. And then I'll try again. And because I tried the last time, there's going to be a group of people that got used to it a little bit. Then I'll get away with a little bit more every time. And so I push the limit until I get what I want eventually. And we've reached that point now where almost anything is permissible, right? They've normalized the death of children. They normalize a lot of different things. You know, it's just when you live in a society where everything is permissible, you can't agree on anything. You would think that there are hard lines where it's like, okay, we can all agree on this. Well,
right?
Actually, we can't anymore. And so when you cannot come back to consensus, you cannot come back to a shared set of principles and values enough to where you say, well, this is a ruling majority that says this is the values and principles that we're living by. You don't have a society. Just because you have a border and just because you have a government, that doesn't mean anything. Like, what are you governing at that point? You're just presiding over chaos, and you're just presiding over people that can't even agree. So then the system just keeps operating with impunity. And it's just like that. What the whole lie about the client list is a message that's not even for us, the American people, because it's not even a hard lie to figure out. It's so blatantly obvious that it's a lie. That lie was a message to the people that are doing this stuff and getting away with it, that no matter what, you will be protected. That's why it's not even a good lie. Like Chris likes to say, I demand a better form of propaganda. Well, you're not going to get it because I'm not even talking to you.
Right.
I'm letting everybody else know that it's okay. Carry on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you take that, again, back to what we're applying it to. You take that culture, and the reason why it's so serious is because in those end times, souls are going to hell.
Right.
Okay. I'll show you something that is so serious. Revelations chapter 6. All right. If you want to look it up for me, Chris, Revelation chapter 6. So let me paint a picture. This cultivation of this culture, of this time, and where these people are going. Now, I think one serious thing will add to it, and that is called the rapture of the church. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount that you are the salt of the earth. When the salt is gone, then what will the earth be good for if there's no saltiness? Nothing but to be trampled underfoot and thrown into the fire. If the salt loses its saltiness. That's what he says. And so you're the salt of the earth. You're here to do a thing. If we're not here, Christians, what do you think will happen to this earth? We're the salt. If the salt isn't here to be salty, if there ain't no salty dogs to level this thing out, then what's going to happen to the unit? You see what I'm getting at? And so there's this thing called the rapture, and this is what makes me think that it's somewhere at the beginning of the 7 years. I kind of like him with Chris. I've got more scripture that tells me we're going to have to go through part of those 7 years, because the whole point is to be tribulation is to be the trying of your faith. So
and Matthew 24 basically laid out that the people, like, don't be led astray, because you're going to be here, and don't fall away, right?
So anyway, when that rapture happens and the salt is taken out, will there be, if there's no salt there, who's going to come to faith in Christ? Who's going to hold the sin into check, which is one of the things the Bible uses salt about, a little leaven, and it helps to level out the bread. Jesus talks about that. If you're taken out, leaven is the sin, there's no salt to hold it in check, boom, the thing just, it has more than enough in it, and it raises, and it does everything else. You don't keep it to a lower flat bread. If you're not into food, if there's nothing to hold it into check, it will just go unchecked. How's that sound? It just goes crazy. And so in Revelations chapter 6, you have this thing. It starts going down, and I'll tell you where to go. You got this prophecy. Now there's a metaphor. Going to break seal number 1, seal number 2, seal number 3, seal number 4. I think it's seal number 5. We're past the 4 horses, and it says about those who cry out from underneath the altar. So if you'll start with the breaking of seal number 5, and it's only a couple of verses long, but check this out. Watch this.
Verse number 9. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been.
Okay, my fault. I'm looking for the one about the moon and the stars falling. What seal was that one?
When he opened the 6th seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?
Okay, check this out. They know who did it. Hide us from God. He did all this. And we're not talking about something small. We're having heavenly bodies fall. We're having, which, by the way, something reminded me of this over in the corner of Germany, Switzerland, or whatever. We had a mountain that sheared itself and fell onto a little town down in the you know how they have their valleys out of the Swiss Alps. Okay.
We have really good evidence that governments are making plans to build reactors on the moon.
Okay.
So
what
I was wondering too.
What an established goal of the CCP is to.
Mm-hmm. And if a reactor on the moon melts down, what
would that look like? Okay. And so literally these heavenly bodies, the people will know that God has done this. They'll hide in a cave, pray for a rock. What good is it going to do to pray to a rock? But they're going to do that to hide them from God. Did anywhere in that scripture, if you knew God did that and he was shaking the foundations of the earth, would you not fall on your knees and say, "Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner"?
You would think.
Did you hear that in there anywhere? No one. In fact, there are several, more than one, 3 or 5 of these instances where something is so horrible and the earth is shaken, and never once do you hear of anybody repenting. My guess is because that salt was taken out of the earth, the people that would show their faith, share Jesus Christ, say the prayer is just this simple: follow me into faith, follow me into... That salt is gone. That's what I see.
But he did say in the verses that I read just before this, then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. So another interpretation could be that all of the remaining Christians had finally been killed.
Time period and dispensation. Seal number 1, right. Seal number 2.
Right. How long?
How long are each one of those seals? Notice this last one, 6, comes right after 5, where you talk about that. So it is a little while longer, somewhere in history. So by the time you get to number 6, that's what I'm talking about. When you get to the
history, but then story.
What's that?
Because it hasn't happened yet. Then story. It's going to happen then.
Same thing about the mark of the beast. We're, is there really Christians there? And in what happens when you take that mark? It says basically you condemned your soul when you do. Now, if you're with the group of people that we're with now, and you go 20 years from now, okay, these Columbia students, New York University students, you take those kids, you go 20 years from now, knowing what you know of them, and somebody, they come out, they make this crazy proposal, they do all that kind of stuff, and somebody may possibly open up a Bible and say, hey, this is exactly what this is saying, and if you take that mark, you're going to condemn yourself. Don't do that. Oh, man. You're reading that old-fashioned Bible. Have you gotten one of these new Living Water Word Bibles? Man, it is really super cool. And you should read that. Or I listened to Pastor so-and-so. He said that ain't... He says that... Yeah, that's what I rail on as other ministers. He says this thing ain't real, man. So, and besides, we got 10,000 in our church. How many go to your little church in the woods? Y'all just a little occult. That's all you are. Now... Can you see how, I was listening to the sermon on Sunday on the internet on my iPhone while I was, somewhere, and my pastor said, and that's the culture. That's the culture we're cultivating, and people want to hear, 1 Timothy, itchy ears, Chris. Mm-hmm. They want to hear what they want to hear. We are cultivating that culture already, and it's going to be so huge. And Jesus said this one thing. He said, so will I find faith when I come back to earth? What do you got?
For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears that will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. That's 2 Timothy 4:3.
And we're in a day and age where people want to hear what they want to hear.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I was thinking on top of all of the things, once we launched into Revelations and we started talking about the seals too, and this is one of those things where I go back to John, who was writing this, was describing the things that he was seeing, but maybe didn't understand everything that he was looking at. But he could tell that the moon turned red like blood. I can see that, and fell out of the sky. I can describe that. But when you see stuff like this starting to happen, And then you're saying, like, here in the Bible it says, right? But they're like, dude, first of all, that's, like you were saying, that's old, archaic writing. We know for a fact that the Chinese reactor melted down on the moon, okay, and that's what happened. It's not some supernatural Bible thing, it was a faulty Chinese system or whatever. And so you have this whole, like, layering. People do it with, like, the abortion issue. Well, we know nowadays that it's just a clump of cells. It's not an actual human being because, well, actually science has proven to us that, well, we know for a fact that, all of the world wasn't created in 6 days in the animals because, look, we have the fossil record that proves evolution brought one to the other. But it's like, it's all these things where it's like science is set up.
What happens to a culture when its science lies to it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've hit up on all of this, but I'm just trying to, like, shine magnifying glasses on the points where people still are going, well, if I saw that happen, I'm pretty sure I would recognize that came from the Bible. No, you're not going to recognize that. Not people who are here then. You're not going to recognize that. The Bible's going to be so archaic and so untrustworthy and so, outside of accepted scientific fact. People already teach it as a collection of moral stories that should give you, a basic moral and ethical paradigm of the world. But it's not to be taken literally. It's lots of poetry and moral writing.
And
that's how it's presented.
And your soul is not at jeopardy, because we all know that's not what the end means. That's what I work for.
Sure.
That's what I work for. Pretty heavy subject tonight, guys. But
yeah, so I just for fun, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
Chat GPT, in a few sentences, how would you tell someone about the Bible? And this is what it says. The Bible is the sacred scripture of Christianity made up of two parts, the Old Testament shared with Judaism and the New Testament about Jesus and early Christianity. It is a collection of books, history, law, poetry, prophecy, and teachings written over centuries by many authors, and Christians see it as inspired by God and guiding faith and life. That's what it says.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say against it.
Thought I'd ask. Right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But it was caveated as, Christians see
right.
this.
That's
correct.
What that's the end of it is a caveat, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even some Christians do not. As is amazing now, the different denominations that do not teach that God's word is what's the two major definitions they use?
Inerrant and
infallible. Thank you, Chris. And there are those that will not tell you that well, I do not believe in the inerrant word of God, that it is filled with errors. I don't know, errors like when Peter said, this is what the prophet Joel said when he said your old men will have visions and your young men will dream dreams. Turn over to Joel, you read it, and he says, this is, in that day your young men will have visions and your old men will dream dreams. And you know what it means? Peter didn't quote him right. But no, that's not, it's not the Bible is in error. He didn't get it right. You're right. Peter didn't get it right. That tells me more of how solid it is than if, you were to do it the other way. The Bible is absolutely congruent with itself. That is one of the best ways to say it. I love it in mathematical terms. The Bible is congruent with itself. It is not perpendicular. It is not at an angle. It is congruent. And it has to be that way because God is not out of line with himself. And he and his word are the same.
the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, those build on one another, so to speak?
Yeah, it's just a small portion of the book of Daniel. There's many other things in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, you have in the beginning the princes of Judah are carried away into captivity. Then very quickly you have the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are thrown into the fiery furnace. You have a couple of chapters later where Daniel has the visions and the prophecy, so that's a section of the book. And then you get to the end of the book where Daniel is put into the lion's den. Then after the lion's den, you have Daniel that is an advisor to the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. There's a couple of other serious major stories in there about Nebuchadnezzar, but Daniel is an advisor to Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, heavy. He's partying with things that were sacred to God, and even his own dad would not take them out of the national treasury and use them. He set them apart as something that was sacred that he brought from Judea. And so he says, we've never used that. I've seen that. Bring that out. And he starts partying with them. And out of nowhere, by the way, this is before the lion's den, out of nowhere, a hand comes and writes on a wall in front of all of them. Freaks everybody out. Of course, when you're half drunk, doesn't take too much to freak you out. And I said, give me somebody that could read it. Well, God wrote it in Hebrew. And and the words were, you have been caught in the balance and you've been found lacking or wanting.
You've been weighed on the scales and found wanting.
You done messed up. And so that's one. And then that night he was killed, and Darius, the new king, comes walking in and makes Daniel an advisor, and then he has the incident with Daniel and the lion's den. So that's the book of Daniel, but there's that 2 to 3 chapters there that has relevance to the book of Revelation. The first thing that has relevance to the book of Revelation is Daniel describes the person who talks to him. In the book of Revelation, chapter 1, he describes the person who is talking. They are pretty close to being identified as looking the same. Skin as bright as shined brass, have the voice of many waters, so that kind of thing. Both of them describe is the same way. The best that we can tell you is that is a Christophany. That is Jesus Christ that they are describing there. They have Daniel has a statue that happens, and there is the beast and it's about kingdoms. And in the book of Revelation, there is the beast that is about kingdoms and has the horns and the different heads that are on it. So there are things that are similar in all of that. But Daniel's only a couple of chapters. Revelations gives us a lot more detail in what we're going to see. So
that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, the book of Daniel is really cool in giving us details. The book of Revelation, this is one of the reasons why I've been hammering at this. Gives us in description a little bit more of the culture that it's going to be able to happen in, and if there's anything that we can see. I can't really tell you. I can't see what's going to be coming in the actual thing. Are we going to? I mean, AI tells me, is it possible that this statue that he's going to bring to life and make speak happen? You betcha. Okay. But when you talk about the 2 prophets and the world and how the world at that time responds to them, I look at the culture. I can see what's being cultivated now and how that can happen, because that's the culture that we're living in. I can see how the hatred for people can happen. I'll tell you another thing that we can see. Ezekiel is another one that brings in some of the stuff. What I was telling you about the water going to the Dead Sea, that's in the book of Ezekiel. There'll be two major battles. Ezekiel covers one battle. It's chapter 38, 39, describe that battle. But it's not the last battle at Armageddon. That's the last battle. But this battle that happens in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it starts with this, and I'll give you a little bit of this description, and then think about what's going on in Israel politically right now. It says that before it starts, that there is peace surrounding all of Israel. And as just starting with that premise alone, that and so Israel is enjoying this peace, and it's kind of a false sense of peace. But look at what they're doing with Iran.
I was just gonna say they just swatted Iran pretty hard and set them back. They've pretty much leveled the Houthis in Lebanon.
Keep going.
And Jordan, and then they're
go to Syria.
They're almost done purging Palestine.
So you got Hezbollah in the north,
and Hamas in Palestine,
and Hamas to the south. Okay, so
or Hezbollah. I said the Houthis, but yeah, Hezbollah.
And so if they get Hezbollah moved out, if they really can have Jordan put up some land toward the Negev, down towards the south and the southeast, and they have them do that and literally start rearranging everything and take over, then they'll have the nation, and there'll be peace on the southern border, peace on the northern border. They'll have all of that, and there'll be this false sense of peace, because under the guise of everything, oh my goodness, who wants to do everything hidden? I mean, half the Muslim world, are trying to do something so they can do a sneak attack. And that's literally what's going to happen, is there's going to be a sneak attack on Israel. It says her enemies will come down out of the north. Chris, were you guys, any of you guys up in the north country of Israel? Have you ever been over there?
No.
I was not. I was in Syria the whole time. But before you finish...
Syria is where I'm talking about. Syria is where I'm talking about. The mountains to the north. You've seen them.
What a better time... I have.
Okay.
Yes. What a better time to reinstate or celebrate peace in the Middle East than by reinstituting sacrifices in the temple.
Correct. I mean,
what a better time to do that, to solidify Israeli hegemony within the country.
Yes.
And we will prove that we have peace with us and the Muslim nations and then boom, right there comes in your individual that you were looking for, that maybe steps on top of the Abraham Accords, and then lays out this deal, and to be like, hey, to celebrate and to show that the Abraham Accords are completely and totally sealed and that we have lasting peace in the Middle East. The Muslims that run the Dome of the Rock are going to allow the Jews to now reestablish and practice their religion next door to them. What better way to show peace than the Muslims are praying right there and the Jews are sacrificing
right there,
right over here on the same mountain? Look at this, guys.
So who showed that to you? How did you catch a vision that that's possible?
I just told you. I've been looking at the trajectory of what's going on.
I just wanted you to say that, because that's my point in the culture, what's being cultivated right now, and you go, well, that's totally possible.
It is. In my lifetime.
More than just in your lifetime. I mean, it could be in my lifetime. Okay, so but
that report said that they'll be really ready to sacrifice, or to the red heifer sacrifice, which is where we started.
Yep.
They will be ready as early as next month.
Yes.
To perform the ceremony, but are more likely looking at October.
Right.
To perform the
ceremony.
Why
October? What's in October?
October 6th.
Yeah. Yom Kippur. the Day of Atonement. That's the day. Okay. So you got that in a month, and the report that I heard that said, do we really need to build a temple? Can we go back to the tabernacle? And in that report they said 2 weeks. That's all we need. 2 weeks. We can have everything to put the tabernacle. We know exactly where to put it.
Do they need the ark?
Not to do sacrifices on the altar. No. I don't know what they would do about the Day of Atonement, because that's where the ark comes in. But to do sacrifices, though.
This is one of those things that I've been saying just in talks with my wife, but there's a reason that when God comes back and Jesus puts his feet on the ground and he comes back as a conquering king, he starts in Jerusalem. First of all, his heart's in Jerusalem, but he's going to start there, right? God is not happy with his people and the way that they have turned away from him. And it's the same story of the
same thing about the kings.
Jewish nation.
Yep.
From Abraham forward, is, you know, like, you just look at it from the very short time of the Jews being liberated from Egypt, right? Passover and coming forward, like they watched plagues, the 10 great plagues that brought one of the greatest nations of the time militarily completely to its knees, right? And they follow Moses out into the desert up against the Red Sea. They see this man. You know, did you just bring us out here to die? Now Egypt's armies are bearing down on us. God parts the Red Sea and he leads them through and then swallows up Pharaoh's armies behind him. And now they're heading into the desert, and they get there. And then Moses goes up on the mountain to retrieve the 10 Commandments. And in the short time that he's gone, hey, Aaron, melt down all this gold so that you can build us a god so that we can make sacrifices. Moses has been gone too long. You know, and it's 40 days.
But we can still see that he's up there because the physical presence of God is still up there. We can see it. Mm-hmm. Can you make us an idol?
Yeah. And
we really need to do this.
The history of God's chosen people is just fraught with that, where God redeems them, he leads them. They turn their back on him almost immediately. Then he comes back and he redeems them and he leads them into the promised land and gives the promised land to them. And they're not there that long. And all of a sudden the Asherah poles start popping up, and then he brings the judges, right? And so it's like each judge in their lifetime brings the people back to God. And they're like, oh yeah, you were right. That was pretty dumb. The judge dies. They immediately turn around and go back to
3 generations. But yeah,
another judge has to come, and then it's like, oh, you know what? You should bring us a king so that we could be like all the other nations. And Samuel the prophet at the time is like, don't you realize if you have a king, he's going to take your gold, he's going to take your daughters, he's going to take your land,
he's going to take your sons to make armies.
Yeah, we really want a king, so they do. And then what does God finds Saul and anoints him king, and within Saul's lifetime turns his back on God and goes back the other direction.
The very first one.
Then God anoints Daniel, and then the kingdom splits. And so it's like this thing with the Jewish people and turning their back on God is just this wheel that has been turning and turning and turning. And so, like, it's one of those things that when God does come back, you know, they're like, he can't be happy with
okay,
before you
get too tough on,
I'm not getting too tough on them. I'm only talking about what happened.
Right. Just
because Hannah made the statement to me too. She goes, if he would have chosen any other race of people, you think they would have been any different? No, I don't think any other race of people would have been any different.
Let's go.
If God would have chosen anybody else.
Let's go from macro. Let's go to micro. In our personal lives, which one of us has been true as an arrow and spot on?
No, 100% guilty. I am not throwing stones. I'm only recognizing as a person that sinned a lot in my life and made a lot of bad decisions. It still doesn't mean that that's not what happened. I'm not holier than thou. That wasn't the point of any of that at all.
But I'm just saying maybe our point of view shouldn't necessarily be as much focused on that as it is that God's going, just like the children of Israel, how are you doing? Because in their macro, do you see your micro? You see your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful that God uses, and it's so beautiful that we have the scripture that we can look at all of these examples. And then I'm going to go back and reference Hosea again, where God literally is like, I'm going to have you marry a whore so that I can show Israel the way that they're acting to me, and yet the way that my true and steadfast, merciful love is chasing them. And I'm going to remain true to the promise I made. Even if they don't remain true. And that's what is astounding about all of this, right? It all points back to God. Not, a lot of people, they get wrapped around the actual of the Jews, and it's like you're missing
the point.
The main character is not Israel in the Bible. The main character is Jesus.
Is God.
The main character is God.
Mm-hmm.
They are the example.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
He had to choose one group of people for Jesus to come through.
And so
those were the people that he chose.
The big deal about eschatology is all of this stuff is going to come to pass. But who deemed it so?
Right.
God is using it to still bring about his purposes. Big lesson in all that. I just, and some pretty evil, pretty wicked stuff. Demons out in the open, murder out in the open, deception. I mean, you should be able to read it and see that it's being deceived. Jesus told us that it would happen, but for some reason, people are still going to be deceived. So how's that? And all of it so that one day, when it's all over, well, before it's all over, what is going to bring the end is that there's going to be this day, this awesome day, out of the eastern sky. Jesus is going to split it. And when he comes down, he will put his feet on the Mount of Olives. And when he does, that mountain is going to rip in half. And when it rips in half, we talked about the Gihon Springs, and they flow a certain way, but they're going to end up flowing backwards. The things that came in from the Mediterranean Sea are going to start flowing back out to the Mediterranean Sea through the mountains that are there, that Mount of Olives that's going to happen. And then he is going to start a processional, and he is just going to walk down the Kidron Valley, up the other side of the hill, and it is still there today, and it's the Eastern Gate. And why the Eastern Gate? Because you can look through the Eastern Gate and you can see the temple. That's his throne, and he's going to walk through it, and he's going to split that door. He is going to literally raise people from the dead. Soleimani put a graveyard out in front of the Eastern Gate because Jews aren't allowed to touch dead people. But when Christ walks across it, they won't be dead anymore. It won't be an unclean act that he will do, and he'll walk through that gate. It will literally shatter open, and he will walk in and claim his throne that belongs to him. And then he's going to raise his hand to the sky. He's going to call for the saints. They're going to come back, and he is going to lead them north, where they will have an eternal battle with the enemy. And it'll be the battle of all battles, and it will be the last battle. And when he walks into that battle, he will not lose a single soldier. Tell me, guys, what does that mean to you, that you've got thousands upon thousands fighting for you, and you can walk into a battle, but you don't lose a man? And he will be the head leading it into battle, and that foe will be vanquished. And when it is all said and done, all nations will come together in that valley, and he will start judging the nations, and he will become the ruler, and he will be the one that will bring back life. And he'll take that 144,000 and the others that may still be there. Don't know how that'll work, but he will give them the perfect diet, and from then he will will reign for 1,000 years, and I guarantee you there will be people that will live the 1,000 years with him, because he will give them what they should eat so that their body will not deteriorate. It won't be based on money. It won't be based on greed. It'll be based on because he is the most benevolent one that will know how to feed those people. I'm sorry, I got on a tirade. I need to slow down, but that is what.
Might as well. You gotta finish now. This is what it's like, by the way, for anybody that sits in on Journey Church at YouTube on Sunday mornings. This is what you have to look forward to.
And but that will all happen, and he will lead it, because God will put into him all things and raise it up to the head, as it says in the book of Ephesians. This is the glory and the riches that God put into him. This is Revelations chapter 5. When you see the Lamb that stands before the throne, he is worthy of all the things, and God placed this in him, and that's why our trust and our discipleship, who we follow, really does matter, and we follow him. He is my king, and I will follow him anywhere and to the ends of the earth, and for as long as he will allow me to. That will be amazing days, and for 1,000 years he will reign, and there will be others that will live almost the same 1,000 years that he will be there, because he will literally feed them. And then one last time, the enemy will come out, because those 144,000 have not been tempted. There will be people who will be born during that time that will never have to serve Jesus, because they were tempted to serve him from a point of sin. They will only know Jesus and how to serve Jesus from the point of righteousness. So they need to be tempted. Make a decision. Who are you going to serve? Me, or are you going to be tempted away? And when all those that decide that they are going to follow Satan the one last time, the hell, death, all of that, they'll be cast away into the lake of fire for the last time. It's called the second death, and that's when God said, okay, we're done with everything, and he will bring his throne down. He will set it upon earth. The old earth will pass away. We have no idea what the new earth will look like, but we do know that God will sit on his throne. He will be the centerpiece. He will be the daytime for everybody, and there will be no need for a sun or a moon, because we have God who sits on the throne, and he will be our life forever and ever.
I'm really glad that you went all the way to the end of the book, because
that was chapter 22.
A lot of people look at me like I'm crazy when you get into the fact of, because there's this misnomer. It's like, what's heaven going to be like? We're all going to flit around with wings and harps forever, and is it going to be boring? It's like, I don't want to live in an eternal church service. Like that. It's just funny things that people say, and to look at them and go, well, actually, the earth's gonna pass away by fire, and then God's gonna build a new heaven and a new earth, and then we're all gonna come back down, and we're gonna be on a perfect earth and be people again, but be people in the way that he
really intended us to be
when he created Adam. They're like, wait, what? Yeah, like we're gonna be people again.
Read the book.
Yeah, read it you never went to the end of the book, But that's the kind of stuff when you got into your little sermon, and very good, by the way. I was instantly 12 years old again. Like that's the kind of stuff when you start going through that, you can see why people go, you guys sound crazy. How does that sound any different to an atheist than when they and Charles Manson said that there was going to be helter-skelter and a great race war, and there was a bottomless pit, and they were all going to go live in there for 1,000 years, and when they came back, they were, you know what I mean? And they compare those two things together. Well, they conflate them.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like, yeah, but that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate when you do these talks, and like you did tonight, you go back to like the biblical archaeology, and you start proving the veracity of the Bible, and you say, well, actually, when it says King David lived here, right? They found the stele, or however you pronounce that word, and the house of David really existed, right? And then you go and you can look and show them in the fossil record in like the Grand Canyon, and you say, if you actually look at the shelves of rock, right, and then all the way up here, why do you have, they find fish skeletons buried in like the mountains in the Himalayas.
Yeah, right.
They're like, how in the world right? And so it's like you start proving to them, actually, a worldwide flood event makes a lot more sense when you look at the geology of the earth. Actually, you know, the figures of the Old Testament, they really did live. You can prove them not only in the biblical record, but they're starting to find records of them in older ancient texts and Assyrian texts, and they're like, well, that's that guy, so he obviously lived. And then we find Jesus referenced, so, you know, all in other ancient texts, and the fact that he did amazing things is recorded in other ancient texts. And so it's like you just start proving to them bit by bit by bit. And if these parts of the Bible are true, if these parts are true and you can prove them to the historical and the archaeological record, then it kind of makes you want to stop and think. And I haven't even gotten into the historicity of the Bible and how it's like the oldest yet most accurate text that we have, and that it has changed very little from the date that it was written and has been maintained and scrupulously copied, you know, until forward, right? It's like the idea of the person of Julius Caesar. You know, nobody really doubts the historical record of Julius Caesar, but if you look at like what writings we have about him, or Augustus and some of these guys, their books are written hundreds and hundreds of years, some of the oldest texts we have about them, after that person had died. But nobody conjectures whether or not the historical record of some of these individuals is true. And yet you're like, well, these four guys lived with Jesus. Well, three of them lived and walked with Jesus, and then one of them wrote his account about talking to the other guys
yeah,
that lived and walked with Jesus, and they were there with him. And this account pops up at least 1 year after he died. This account pops up just 2 or 3 years or 5 years after he died, and this account pops up 10 years after he died and came back from the dead. And they have changed none from the time that they were written until the documents that we have now. We can prove them to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then from the Dead Sea Scrolls we can take leaps back and say they haven't changed for those hundreds of years. Look, we can, so for all of these reasons, it definitely should make somebody stop and pause and wonder if these items are true and the historicity of the Bible can be proven true through the lineage of documents. Don't you think that you should consider some of the stuff that it says in the end of the book too?
That's why there's an attack on truth. That's why there's an attack on truth. I'll leave you guys with this. This is probably a good place to wrap things up. Several years ago, there was a Bedouin sheep herding kid, and I do mean a kid, and he's out in the middle of the desert, got his sheep, got his staff, whatever. There's a piece of papyrus about the size of your hand, flapping in the wind, just sticking up out of the sand. It's just sticking up out of the sand. He goes and he gets it. He recognizes it as papyrus, understands that this is I can probably get some money for this back at the antiquities shop back in Jerusalem. So he takes it in, and I think a guy pays him $10 for it, something like that. And the one side, not very identifiable, but they flipped it over on the other side. They treated it and so forth, and they got the Greek writing. It's written in Greek to pop out of it, and it's from the Passion story of Christ out of John. It's when he's standing before Pilate, and on this simple piece of paper, papyrus, it's really not paper, 2,000 years later, God is trying to speak to us, and what was written on that piece of paper is this simple question: what is truth? That is the earliest piece of gospel writing that we have, but it's not an original. It's 250 years old after the time of Christ. That's what it was identified. But I still think it's God trying to speak to all of us today. One little phrase: what is truth? I think it's something that every man, woman, a child old enough to be able to handle it, is something that everybody still has to answer for themselves.
I agree.
It's not philosophy. So
I agree. Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking about this. It's an incredibly interesting subject. I know that I learned a lot about it. it'll be interesting to see if that actually ends up happening in August or October. And I don't know. It kind of seems like they need to find the Ark of the Covenant too, and that'll be really interesting to see. Unless I'm wrong when I said that, but it kind of seems like there's other things that have to fall in place. But I know for a fact we definitely live in interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the Ark of the Covenant will be found, and I only say that because there is no mention of it in the book of Revelation. There is the altar, but not the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
I think it would make the most sense that they'll try to move on with what types of ceremonies they can, and then maybe even designate a stand-in for the Ark of some kind. Would probably be like the most logical way forward. I would imagine.
And it seems like that's what the altar is being used for, as a stand-in for the Ark, just because it's mentioned a little bit more and the Ark isn't mentioned at all. So I think you got something there, but we're definitely being a lot of supposition in what we're saying. Let's just put it that way. The Bible doesn't really tell us, so we're drawing straws.
Well, and like you pointed out, before 1948, Christians were looking at it and they're like, none of this stuff can even happen. There is no Israel.
Right. A lot of writings from that point of view. A lot.
Well, guys, if you're still listening, 3 hours in, appreciate you guys' time. Please check out the show notes. As I like to say, one of the best ways to support us is by supporting the sponsors. Smash the follow button if you found value in this conversation, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much again for your time, Pastor Eric.
They call it the rapture. Paul talks about it. Then there's this other thing.